Hello and welcome to Unacademy, a one-stop destination for the English medium civil services aspirants. Welcome to International Relations 101, a one-shot marathon where we discuss the most important basic concepts and theories from international relations. Today's discussion would be extremely beneficial for beginners, especially if you're preparing for GS paper 2 and if you have PSIR as your optional. What we are going to discuss today would help you lay a strong foundation for this dynamic subject. So let's look at the topics that we are going to discuss. Very carefully, I have chosen 10 important topics. We will be covering basic concepts such as what is foreign policy, what do you mean by national interests. We will discuss terminologies such as geopolitics, geostrategy, geoeconomics. I'm sure you would be familiar with these terms, but today we will break down these concepts. And during the discussion, I will be providing you with plenty of examples so that you can easily relate to these topics and remember the topics as well. For every topic, we will be taking up practice questions for prelims and especially for mains, and I'll be discussing the answer writing approach as well. So stay with me for the next 2.5 to 3 hours so that we can ensure we will complete these 10 topics comprehensively, which will help lay a strong foundation for international relations. I hope all of you are ready. But before we start, I have an important announcement. Unacademy is conducting a special class festival where you get a chance to be taught by our top educators. And these classes are absolutely free. It started on 18th of September, will continue till tomorrow, the 20th of September, from morning till night at 10 p.m. Let me show you the schedule of these classes so that you can ensure that you don't miss these special classes as well. Mukesh sir is taking few sessions from geography. Me and Aastha ma'am have been covering few strategy sessions and current affairs classes. And we also have Shyam sir, Sarmad sir, and Abhishek sir taking these classes, which will help lay a good foundation for your preparation. So those interested, click on the link provided in the video description. And if you want the PDF of this session, please join our official Telegram channel by scanning the QR code on your screen. Today's PPT is very detailed. I've given the important pointers which can serve as a ready-made notes for you. There are practice questions. So ensure that you get this PDF by joining our official Telegram channel. So if all of you are ready, let's begin. But I have one request from you. I want this discussion to be highly engaging. I want you to participate. Whenever I ask a question, I want you guys to reply back and try to answer the practice questions as well. And if you find these initiatives to be interesting and useful, do support us with your likes and comments. And don't forget to hit the subscribe button. So let's begin with the first topic, foreign policy and national interests. What do you mean by foreign policy? Why should a country have a foreign policy of its own? I know it's a very basic fundamental question. UPSC may not ask about this topic, but if you are a beginner, if you're trying to understand the subject of international relations, you must start with these basics. That's why this class is named as IR 101, covering the essential concepts, the basic principles, the theories which are relevant for the subject. So let's start with this essential term. What is foreign policy? What do you mean by it? Why should countries have a foreign policy? Let me give you a very simple explanation. I'll not go by the textbook or standard definition. I'll try to explain this in my own words so that you can register the concept and later you can use this if required in the exam as well. Now, that is what is required for this examination. You should not focus on mugging up or just memorizing the facts and definitions. Rather, you should internalize these concepts, understand them, break it down, and express in your own words. Especially in mains exam, that is what will make a difference in your descriptive answers. So, foreign policy is a tool or an instrument which is available to the government to protect and to promote the national interests of our country. This is the simplest explanation of foreign policy. Why a country should have a dedicated foreign policy? Why should a country have a separate ministry handling the foreign relations? The answer is very simple. Foreign policy becomes that instrument for the government to ensure that the national interest of the country is not only protected but promoted as well. So this is the purpose served by foreign policy of a country. A sovereign government will maintain external relations with neighbors and important global powers and global institutions and organizations. By maintaining these ties, the sovereign government is trying to protect and promote the core interests of the nation, which we call as the national interest of that country. So on the screen, you can see the standard definition as well. You can make a note of this. Foreign policy is an instrument available to a country to protect and promote its national interests. Now, this concept was very simple. I'm sure everybody would have understood this. But what do you mean by national interests? How do you explain what are the interests of a nation? Can we define this? Are there any factors which determine the national interests of a country? This is what we will break down. I will help you understand what do you mean by national interests of a country, why it is so important in international relations. Look at these statements that I have added on your screen. There is one statement to my left made by former President Pranab Mukherjee when he was addressing the joint session of the parliament. He made a very important statement talking about India's foreign relations, and he pointed out that India's foreign policy is always driven by one objective. What is that objective? The objective is to ensure that we protect the enlightened national interests of our nation. More recently, Foreign Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar also made a reference to the concept of national interests. In the context of the Russia-Ukraine war, as India chose to side with Russia and maintained a tightrope, a diplomatic tightrope walk between Ukraine and Russia, India was heavily criticized by Western media, by Western think tanks and Western governments, especially from Europe. India received a lot of hate and criticism for siding with Russia, for never criticizing Russia, for violating the sovereignty of Ukraine. While facing these questions, our foreign minister replied that India is just looking after its own national interests. That is the reason why we have such a policy, a balanced approach towards the Ukraine war, where we are neither 100% siding with Russia, nor are we moving away from the West completely. It's a very balanced position that India has taken to ensure that our overall national interest is protected. So these statements by the leadership of the Indian government, it clearly tells you why national interests can be so important. So we need to understand what factors are defining these national interests. Are they static? Do they remain constant? Or does it keep on evolving? And who defines the national interest? Is it codified somewhere in a law or in the constitution? Or is there a essential note or a guideline which the government has provided? Or is it just an unspoken, unwritten standard which is established in our foreign policy? Let's understand the determinants of India's national interests one by one. What do you mean by the interests of a nation? The interests of a country could be almost anything. But when we say national interests, we are referring to the core interests of the nation, the topmost priority. Those issues which really matter to our nation. So, one of the first and foremost determinants of national interest would be the security of the nation, the sovereignty of the country, the territorial integrity of our borders. So, one primary goal of our foreign policy is to secure the territorial integrity of the nation, ensure that our borders are protected, ensure the defense of the country. Because there are hostile powers who are trying to threaten India's sovereignty, unity, and integrity. It could be hostile actors like Pakistan or terrorist groups which are funded by Pakistan, or other hostile countries which are in the neighborhood and beyond as well, which might be threatening our territorial integrity, our sovereignty, and our borders. So, defending the nation against these external threats, protecting the national security of the nation, and achieving the strategic goals that have been laid down. This becomes one of the core ingredients of our national interest. So, this includes the protection of our borders, ensuring that terror attacks are prevented, or at least the impact of it is mitigated, ensure that the hostile enemies of the country are tackled with. So, it also includes economic security of the nation, the energy security of the nation as well, especially since India is heavily dependent on energy imports. So, all these aspects, which are crucial for the stability of the country, the very survival of the nation, becomes one of the first determinants of national interests. So, protecting the nation against, let's say, any attempts of external aggression. Look at the previous wars that India has fought, be it with Pakistan, be it with China, or look at the various security challenges we have dealt with in our neighborhood, from terrorism to organized crime to even piracy. So, tackling all these threats and challenges, upholding the national security of the country, and furthering our strategic goals becomes the number one priority when it comes to our national interests. Apart from this, maximizing trade and economic opportunities, promoting commerce becomes another fundamental interest in foreign policy. Foreign policy is essentially designed to bring some economic benefits, developmental benefits to our nation. Because India, as a large nation, would require markets where we can export our goods. It could be our agricultural produce, our industrial manufacturing products, especially from our MSME industries. They need to be exported to markets around the world so that we can support these basic industries, agriculture, manufacturing, industrial growth, which in turn create millions of jobs for our people. See, many students are under the perception that our domestic developments are not connected to external developments. This is largely a myth, it's a misconception. Your domestic developments are always connected to the external developments and vice versa. Our internal developments will influence our external policy, and global developments will also influence our internal dynamics. So please understand this linkage. The external developments are linked with your internal developments. There is a two-way relationship that exists between the two. For example, changes in Indian economy, any changes or new developments in our society, in our social fabric, or with regard to our politics, this will directly influence our foreign relations. It will have an impact on the region and beyond. And similarly, developments in our neighborhood, developments around the world, will have a direct impact on India as well. Take, for example, US tariffs, the trade war that Donald Trump has unleashed. Don't you see the economic effect of that? Don't you think Trump's tariff wars is affecting our exports to the US market, directly hitting our producers? So, protecting the trade interests, the economic relations, promoting them, creating opportunities for commerce is a core objective of foreign policy. It's one of the determinants of national interest. So, signing free trade agreements, working out trade concessions, finding new raw materials which are necessary for the country's growth, finding those resources and procuring essential resources. So, this not only includes energy supplies like oil, gas, etc., it will include essential minerals, critical strategic minerals, rare earth elements, and other components or intermediary products which are needed for our industry. Whatever we don't have or whatever we don't produce, this has to be procured from the outside to ensure the stability of the Indian economy. So, securing the raw materials and resources that are needed becomes a core economic objective. So, ensuring that fair trade is followed, fair trade policies are followed and respected, is an integral objective under trade, economic relations, and commerce. Correct? So, this is again a national interest which is driven or which is promoted, protected through our foreign policy. Coming to the next determinant, projecting the country's soft power. Later, I will explain what is soft power in detail. We'll come to that a little while later. But for now, understand that projecting a nation's soft power refers to the projection of our cultural influence. So, engaging in cultural diplomacy, leveraging our civilizational heritage, our cultural assets, and utilizing them in our foreign relations to create influence. This is also a core part of national interest of the nation. Is that clear? Now, look at how India has promoted yoga or how Indian movies, Indian music has been widely popular, or even our classical art forms, how they have a global appeal. And when the government deliberately promotes these cultural assets of the country, you are basically projecting your cultural influence. You're trying to create a positive image for the nation. You're trying to attract, persuade the foreign audience. You're trying to get that global support in your favor, not just from the governments, but from the people of the other countries as well. This helps in the creation of goodwill and trust, and you cannot buy this with money. You can't threaten others and buy goodwill and trust. Or you can't simply splurge money on other countries and try to purchase that goodwill and trust. Goodwill and trust has to be earned. And for a country like India with a rich civilizational heritage, using our cultural assets is the best way to create that long-term influence. So look at the kind of cultural presence that we have, the distribution of the Indian diaspora, the goodwill that we generally enjoy in most countries. This is not just an outcome of India's military or economic might. It is largely an outcome of our civilizational heritage and how we have leveraged that in our diplomacy. So, projecting soft power influence becomes a core mandate of our foreign policy. It becomes one of our determinants of our national interests. Now, apart from this, through foreign policy, we are trying to export certain ideological agendas as well. We are trying to promote certain ideology. For example, let's say India has a strong belief in democracy. This has been the founding ethos of our nation. So, India would naturally support democracies around the world. If, let's say, a new democracy is being established in some part of the world, India would be more than happy to play a role to strengthen the democracy in the other countries. For example, look at how India funded the construction of the Afghan parliament in Kabul. India handled the construction of the parliament building as well to strengthen the civilian government, essentially to help the civilian elected government to counter the extremist radical forces and to cement the democratic values in Afghanistan. We have helped many countries in the conduct of their elections. We have also helped many countries to transition to a democracy, be it Myanmar or be it countries in Africa. Since India's independence, India has always supported the democratic transition in African nations. So this is nothing but an ideological export where we are promoting a certain ideology for a free and fair and liberal world order. Then India's belief in human rights, upholding constitutional principles, fundamental rights, protecting basic rights like right to life, right to free speech and expression. So this is something India takes very seriously, and you see a reflection of this in our foreign policy as well. So if any region, let's say a war or a conflict has broken out or a civil war is taking place, India raises a concern about the violation of human rights. If war crimes are being committed or a genocide is being, let's say, committed, India will definitely express its concern at least about the situation and tries to bring pressure on those countries to ensure that stability is brought back. So, promotion of human rights, standing up for human rights is an ideological agenda. Or look at how India promoted the non aligned movement during the Cold War. When the world was divided between the West and the East, right? India established a new ideology. India championed the third neutral ideology, which is referred to as the non aligned movement. So, through foreign policy, you can export your ideological beliefs, your belief in democratic systems, your belief in constitutional principles and human rights. This is exactly what you can promote to ensure a peaceful world. Now, don't you see India urging Israel to work towards a ceasefire in Gaza? Don't you see India urging Russia and Ukraine to talk to each other and end the war? So this is a classic example of India trying to push peaceful negotiations over war in order to protect human rights and protect democratic institutions and principles. Later, we will discuss more about the NAM. I'll come to this topic again. But for now, this should be sufficient. Then the other determinants of our national interests also includes the creation of more space and more options at multilateral institutions, at global platforms such as United Nations or World Bank and IMF or the World Trade Organization, or with regard to export control regimes such as the Non-Proliferation Treaty or even the Climate Change Convention, the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change. At these global platforms, at these multilateral institutions, Indian diplomacy will try to create more space for India. It will try to create some flexibility to protect our core interests. It will try to create more options by working with like minded countries. Now, let us break this down. Let's understand this with the help of an example. Now, you take the Climate Change Convention, for example. I'm sure you must be familiar that the world was divided between the developed and developing nations when it came to climate change negotiations. Ever since the Climate Change Convention began in the early 1990s after the Rio Earth Summit, since then, India has been siding with developing countries, underdeveloped countries that represent the global south. We have been working with the global south to provide a voice, to provide a representation to them, so that developed nations which are responsible for historical emissions, they are held accountable for their historical responsibilities. You might have heard about the Kyoto Protocol, under which the CBDR principle was incorporated. CBDR stands for Common but Differentiated Responsibilities. This principle ensures that developed nations which were responsible for releasing the greenhouse gas emissions, which essentially developed their economies through rapid industrialization by relying on fossil fuels, which solved their socio-economic problems through economic and industrial growth, they are held responsible for the historical emissions they have emitted. And in return, developed countries were mandated as well to provide for finance, to share technology with developing and underdeveloped countries because they have never been able to utilize the carbon budget. The carbon budget that was available was largely utilized by developed industrialized countries. In fact, they became developed primarily in the first place because they managed to burn fossil fuels without restrictions. So, don't you think there needs to be a space for developing underdeveloped countries as well to grow their economies, create jobs, uplift their people from poverty? So, this can't happen without some continued reliance on fossil fuels. And to transition to cleaner fuels like solar or nuclear power or wind energy, they need finance because these are expensive technologies. They also need assistance in technology for clean renewable energy. So, this mandate is placed on developed nations thanks to the CBDR principle. Though it has been diluted under Paris Agreement, this principle was championed by India with other developing and underdeveloped nations. India worked with China, with Brazil, South Africa, the basic group of countries. We formed an alliance of like minded nations and worked with all the underdeveloped countries from Asia, Africa, Latin America. And we pushed this initiative, creating more space for India's negotiations and creating more options to protect our interests. Because developed countries were trying to enforce equal commitments on others. Now, why should a country like India take up that extra commitment? India is not responsible for historical emissions. Today, we might be one of the largest emitters. But why should we pay or incur the same cost as developed countries? Right? So, the principle of equity was brought into climate change talks thanks to these diplomatic efforts of India. So now I think you'll better understand what do you mean by creating more space and more options in the international fora. So at these global platforms, we always try to protect our interests and we create these clubs and alliances to work with like-minded nations. So this is a core aspect of your national interests. Look at how we are pushing for UN reforms. Look at how we are pushing for reforms of the Bretton Woods institutions, the World Bank and the IMF. Or look at WTO, how India has worked with the global south to ensure that fair trade is protected through the World Trade Organization. All these are examples of Indian foreign policy successfully creating more space for India, more options for India at international institutions. So this is also a part of our national interest. Then finally, ensuring the safety, the well being of the Indian community abroad. The Indian diaspora is very well spread out across the world, be it the non resident Indians, the NRIs who are studying in other countries, working in other countries, or it could be the overseas citizens of India and the people of Indian origin, the OCIs and PIOs, whose ancestors might have emigrated from India, settled in those countries. So, this Indian community, they have their roots in India. Their cultural roots, their familial connections are with India. So, ensuring their safety and well being becomes an obligation of the Indian government, a responsibility of the Indian state. Now, let's say, for example, Indian community gets trapped in a war zone. A war breaks out and Indians are trapped in the war zone. Or a civil war has broken out, riots are taking place in a country, and thousands of Indians are stuck in the conflict zone. So, rescuing them and evacuating them, bringing them to safety, if required, bringing them back to India, is a duty of the Indian government. Some of you might ask, why should India be responsible for this? If these people have left our country, why should India care about them? Why should India have a duty and responsibility on itself to protect them? Please understand, this is a moral duty, a moral obligation to protect your people. They might have gone to other countries, correct? But they're contributing to India in a very big way. They're contributing to the Indian economy. They're contributing to Indian foreign policy. They're basically giving us the soft power influence in other countries. So it's only the duty of the Indian government to protect and take care of its community, to protect the diaspora abroad. Because the Indian community, they act as cultural ambassadors of India. They promote India's rich cultural heritage. See, I was talking about soft power, right? Did you know that India leverages its religious links, ethnic, linguistic links, and we try to promote that through our diplomacy? Take, for example, how we promote Buddhism in Asian countries where Buddhism is popular, or how we leverage our Hindu linkages or Islamic linkages to push our foreign policy initiatives in countries where there is a reasonable community, or in Islamic nations of West Asia, for example. We leverage our religious connections, our ethnic, linguistic links. So when you work with the Indian community abroad, you basically get that soft power advantage. The Indians over here act as cultural ambassadors of India. They speak different Indian languages. They practice religion or faith which is rooted in India. The food they consume, the festivals they celebrate, it all connects back to India, and this will automatically create a goodwill because, in general, the Indian community abroad is very well accepted. Of course, recently there is a rising trend of anti immigration across the world. We have seen a rise of far right wing politics from US to Europe to Australia. You might have heard of all the anti immigration rallies. But prior to this, because this anyway is a global trend, prior to this, Indian community has been always welcomed with open hands across the world. Indian community is considered to be law abiding, respectful of local culture and sensitivities. Indians are known to be hardworking, smart, and well educated, and they have contributed to the economy of the other nations where they have been settled. So, this creates a leverage for India's foreign policy. Several members of the Indian community, they would have become very successful as well, be it in business or in politics. They might have even entered government services in the bureaucracy and they would have risen up to top positions. There have been many members of the Indian community who have gone on to become head of states and head of governments. Take, for example, Rishi Sunak from the UK or Naveen Chandra Ramgoolam from Mauritius. We have had prime ministers, presidents of Indian origin. So, this creates a natural influence for India to influence foreign governments. There are senators in the US of Indian origin. The former Vice President Kamala Harris was of Indian origin. The current second lady in the US, the wife of JD Vance, is of Indian descent. So, this creates a natural pull, a natural influence for us. And by leveraging that influence, you can shape the foreign policy of the other governments, exert a positive influence on them. This reminds me of one example. In 2005, when the historic India US nuclear deal was struck, the then Manmohan Singh government had leveraged the influence of the Indian community, the Indian American community, to exert a positive pressure on the then George Bush government that played a role in ensuring that the India US nuclear deal was successfully executed. This was a transformative deal which lifted the shadows that were cast on India's nuclear program. India got global recognition when the US itself came out and recognized our nuclear track record. It essentially ended the pariah status of India, and India was more welcomed into global platforms and arrangements. So, this was made possible because of our influence leveraged through the Indian American community. And don't forget, the Indian community sends back remittances. The money they earn, they send it back to India to their families who are back in India. The inward remittances we get has become a crucial part of the Indian economy. Are you aware of what volume of remittances do we receive? Any idea? Can someone mention in the comments? What is the worth of the remittances that are bound towards India in a given year? Any idea? Do you have any inclination regarding how much remittances do we get? Today, India has become the world's largest recipient of remittances. We've overtaken China as well. 800 billion. No, no, no. 800 billion is too much. It's not 800 billion. Tejaswini Namani is correct. It is above $100 billion. It is more than 100 billion, in the range of 110 to 120 billion dollars. This is the inward remittance that we are receiving on an average. Just remember, it's above $100 billion. We have overtaken China to become the largest recipient of remittances. And these inward remittances are crucial to bridge our current account deficit. Because on the current account, we always register a huge deficit because we import more than what we export. Correct? So, to bridge that gap in balance of payments, the inward remittances plays a big role to bridge that current account deficit. If not for these remittances, we would have a very wide current account deficit, which can have macroeconomic implications on India's forex reserves, on the value of the Indian rupee, and on inflation numbers in the country as well. Just see how these are connected, how it is related. So Indian community abroad is helping our economy through the remittances which are bound towards the country. Is that clear? So it's only a duty of the Indian state to protect the Indian community and ensure their overall safety and well-being. Because abroad, they might face many problems and challenges. For example, when the Ukraine war began, almost 20,000 Indian students were stuck in Ukraine. So India had to evacuate them, rescue them under Operation Ganga. During all the recent conflicts, be it the civil war in Sudan or the Gaza war or the recent face off between Israel and Iran or the Taliban takeover in Afghanistan, during all these incidents, Indian government had to rescue the Indian community. Sometimes we had to airlift them. This requires tremendous planning, tremendous logistics and influence. And India has been able to do that. We've been doing this from 1990s, since the Gulf War began, when Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait in 1991. Almost 1.9 lakh Indians were stuck in Iraq and Kuwait. The then Indian government had to work with these governments, especially with Saddam Hussein, create a corridor for Indians to be brought out, and we managed to airlift them back into India. You might have seen the Bollywood movie starring Akshay Kumar, Airlift. It is loosely based on these events. Of course, in the movie, they don't pay full credit to the government efforts. They try to project as if one individual managed to do this. But obviously, it's a Bollywood movie, it's fictional. But in reality, the Indian government played a critical role during the airlift during the Gulf War. Then recently in Yemen in 2015, when the Houthi rebels took over the country, thousands of Indians were trapped, and India launched Operation Rahat to safely bring back the Indians, and we also rescued foreign nationals as well. Or take the Taliban takeover in Afghanistan in 2021. India launched Operation Devi Shakti to bring the Indians back. You might remember during the pandemic, when around the world lockdowns were being imposed and travel restrictions were being imposed, millions of Indians were stuck across the world. So we launched the Vande Bharat mission, creating air corridors to bring lakhs of Indians back home. We had Operation Samudra Setu, where Indian Navy was deployed as well to bring the Indians back. So there is a history of such evacuation missions. So this is how India tries to protect its community abroad. And it's not just about getting caught in a war zone or getting trapped in civil wars. They could face many other problems. Indians might get arrested or jailed in foreign countries. They might end up receiving the death penalty for a crime they may or may not have committed. Or they might face problems with visas, passports, or they might be duped by their employers, by the middlemen who are promising jobs to them, and they might be trafficked as well. So this remains a persistent problem and a concern. For example, you might have heard of this recent incident in Yemen, where an Indian nurse from Kerala has been held guilty of murdering a Yemeni citizen, and she has been delivered the death punishment. So India is working with the family and other influence groups to try and get this death penalty lifted and to bring her back safely to the country. We have Kulbhushan Jadhav, detained by Pakistan, arrested, given the death penalty. And Pakistan is accused that he was a raw agent involved in activities against Pakistan. But India has denied the claims, but we ensured that the death penalty was stayed by approaching the International Court of Justice. So I'm just giving you a sample of what India does to protect its community abroad. Is that clear? Be it an evacuation that is necessary or providing consular support to help them with any problems they are facing in other countries, or ensuring that their overall well-being is taken care of, especially when let's say there is racism in a country, racist attacks are rising. India will try to bring pressure on that foreign government to protect the Indian community. In Qatar, Indian nationals were arrested, detained under espionage charges recently. They were formerly with the Indian Navy. They had all worked with the Indian Navy's former military officers, detained by the government of Qatar. India had to intervene at the highest level, at the level of the Prime Minister, to safely get the Indian former military officers back home. So there are many, many such examples and incidents I can quote, which shows the priority that we give to protect the Indian community. So this is a determinant of our national interest, core priority in our foreign policy. Now I have one important statement to make before I end this topic. National interest, some of it can be static, some of it can remain constant. It may not change, but some national interests will keep on evolving with changing economic trends, changes in science and technology, and global developments. A country's national interests will also keep on changing. For example, if you look at our commitment to democracy, this is a static uh, part of our national interest. In 1947 as well, India was committed to upholding democratic principles. In 2025 as well, we are committed to promoting democratic principles. So this commitment to democracy, human rights, it's a static part of our national interest. It remains a constant. There might be changes in government, different prime ministers will come and go, different ruling parties will come and go. But some principles will remain forever. It will not change. India's independent foreign policy, our principle of strategic autonomy, it has been a constant principle which you see in our foreign relations. Be it a Congress led government, a BJP led government, a coalition government, doesn't matter who's in power, doesn't matter who's the prime minister. Some principles of our foreign policy remain static, remain constant. But some of them will keep on changing, it will keep on evolving. With the era of globalization, our economic priorities have changed. We have opened up our economy since the LPG reforms. Now we want foreign investments. We want new markets abroad. We are trying to source raw materials needed for our economy. So our economic priorities are changing. Same with technology as well. As technology evolves with the emergence of computers and high speed internet, digital connectivity, with the emergence of critical emerging technologies like artificial intelligence, right? Geopolitics is changing as well. Look at issues like cybersecurity, cyber crimes, and cyber warfare. So these were not part of our national interest maybe in 1960s, 1970s. But today, dealing with these technological problems and challenges has become a national priority. Are you getting my point? So some national interests will keep on evolving as the world changes around us. But some core principles will remain static and constant, no matter what changes happen, internally or externally. Then there's a very important saying as well, very popular statement. National interests, right? It essentially teaches you that in the world of geopolitics, there are some permanent friends, but you can't always rely upon these permanent partners because friendship also keeps on changing in the world of international relations. Today, you might consider someone to be a permanent friend or a permanent reliable partner. Tomorrow, it might change entirely, it might drastically turn around. So, there is this statement which was made popular by Henry Kissinger, the former National Security Advisor and Secretary of State of the US government. He popularized this statement that there are no permanent friends, no permanent enemies in the world of geopolitics. You only have permanent interests. The interests of a nation will remain permanent. Those interests might evolve and change, but nation's interest is what is permanent in foreign policy. You don't have permanent friends or permanent enemies. So there's no concept of BFFs in international relations. And you can't have arch enemies all the time. Things might change. And this is happening right in front of you. Just until few months ago, US was our best partner. India US relationship was labeled as the most defining partnership of the century. But now see what Donald Trump has done. He has turned the relationship upside down by claiming that he mediated the ceasefire between India and Pakistan, by targeting India with the tariff wars, by punishing India for importing Russian oil. India US relations have taken a complete U turn. And look at what has happened with China. Over the last 4 or 5 years, we had a hostile, tense relationship with China with regard to the Ladakh military standoff. But today we have reset the relationship. PM Modi is shaking hands with Xi Jinping, and India China are looking to work together to counter Trump's policies. Look how quickly the world of geopolitics can change. Like before, you don't need decades or centuries for partnerships to change. In today's world, it is changing in days, in hours. So there are no permanent friends, no permanent enemies. Only the interest of the nation remains permanent. Look at the other example. Before before 1950s. I'm talking about the World War era. Now you tell me, who were the countries fighting against each other during the World War? US, UK, France, for example, weren't they on one side? Weren't they fighting Germany, Japan, Italy, which were the fascist powers during Second World War in particular? Now, do you think the same reality remains even today? This has completely changed. In fact, Russia was with the Allied powers, fighting Nazi Germany, Mussolini's Italy, and Imperial Fascist Japan. These were the arch enemies of the Allied powers. In fact, China was on the side of the Allied powers. So, can you believe there was a world that existed a century ago where US, Russia, China were on the same page, fighting a common enemy? And today, this has completely reversed. Today, Germany, Japan, Italy are the best allies of US, UK, and France, whereas Russia, China have become their enemies. So look at how the world order keeps on shifting. So there are no permanent friends, no permanent enemies, only permanent interests. So I hope this topic is completely clear for all of you. We have discussed what are national interests, what is foreign policy, why is foreign policy required, what are the determinants of national interests. Correct? Now let's take up a practice question. This is just to test whether you have understood the topic. Maybe UPSC will not give such static questions from IR. But again, just to test your level of understanding, let's take up a practice question. Which amongst the following geopolitical development gets the least priority from the perspective of India's core national interests? I want you to read this question carefully, then give me the right answer. What do you think should be given the least priority? So there are different scenarios given, and you should decide which of these issues will have the least impact on India. So it's obviously a relative comparison. So can you tell me which of these geopolitical developments should be our least national priority? US tariff policy aimed at China, civil war in Myanmar, Russia's anti-West propaganda, border war between Guyana and Venezuela. So just like I guessed, I expected, almost all of you are saying D is the right answer. Almost 99% students are saying D is correct. Okay, let me break your hopes. D is not the correct answer. Why? I'll explain. C would be the most appropriate answer. See, America's tariff wars aimed at China, this will have a direct impact. It will have a direct impact on Indian economy. I think this goes without explaining, because America's tariffs wars aimed at China could have some implications, positive or negative implications for Indian economy. So this is something India will directly watch out for. In the previous Trump administration, when US levied tariffs on China, it was good for India because it led to the diversion of some foreign investments from China to India, what we refer to as China plus one. Many foreign companies shifted their manufacturing out of China and started investing in countries like India. So in a way, India benefited from the tariff war between US and China. But now things are different, right? So these tariff wars, though it is aimed at some other country, it could directly affect or impact India's economic interests. So this becomes a priority for us. Civil war in Myanmar, obviously a priority. Whatever happens in your neighborhood will have a direct impact. It could be regime change, which we have seen in Nepal and Bangladesh. It could be economic crisis, which we have seen in Sri Lanka, or economic security and political crisis, which we are witnessing in Pakistan, or the civil war in Myanmar. These developments in our immediate neighbors can spill over. Any security threats or economic situation, political situation in our immediate neighborhood can spill over across the border and have a direct impact on India. So it will become a top priority. From Myanmar, we have received refugees. The flow of refugees and illegal migrants from Myanmar has been linked with ethnic violence in Manipur. Correct? The Meitei Kuki issue is connected to the Zomi refugees and migrants who have come in from Myanmar. So this becomes a priority for us. Then any border war between Guyana and Venezuela should deserve more priority from India compared to Russia's anti West propaganda. You know why? There are two reasons why. One, Venezuela has the world's largest known oil reserves, and it is a oil supplier to India. And not just that, if such a border war breaks out between Venezuela and Guyana, this will have a direct impact on the large Indian community in Guyana. I hope you're aware. In South America, there are countries like Suriname and Guyana where there's a very strong Indian community. They are the descendants of Indian laborers, the indentured laborers who were transported by the British during the colonial period. Recently, PM Modi visited Guyana just last year, met with the Indian community. There are lakhs of people of Indian origin, Indian descent in Guyana. And Venezuela has been claiming the oil basin of Guyana. And if this turns into a war, don't you think lakhs of members of Indian diaspora would be uprooted? Their safety, their survival would be at risk. So this will become a much bigger priority for us. Since statement C is the most appropriate in relative comparison, that is the right answer. Because Russia's anti-West propaganda will of course have a indirect impact. It will force India to choose between the West and Russia. But Russian propaganda alone will not directly affect us, right? Or take Russia's covert war in Europe, where Russian intelligence is trying to undermine European and American interests. This is something which will not directly or immediately affect us. The overall impact will be slightly limited, meaning we can still deal with it over a period of time, but the other issues will become a topmost priority, a immediate priority. That's why C is the correct answer, not D. Just because Guyana is far away, don't automatically assume that this is the least priority for us. Correct? So I hope this concept is clear. Now look at the mains practice question. What are the determinants of national interests? Examine in the context of India's foreign policy priorities. This is the question given to you, and such a question can be asked in UPSC mains. So please be prepared for this. Now that you have studied this topic, can you make one-page notes? Can you make a ready one-page notes with all the pointers for the topic of national interest and keep it ready? If at all there is a question based on this or related to it, you can directly use those pointers and write your answers. So the PPT contains the points for you. You just have to put in that basic effort to make one-page notes on this topic. Now let me give you the answer writing approach. Let's quickly discuss how you can approach this particular question. See, to write a good mains answer, first try to understand what the question is expecting from you. Read the question carefully for a few seconds. If not once, read it twice and break down the question, because every question has subparts. In each question, there might be 2 or 3 sub questions. So try to understand this first so that your answer can satisfy the requirements of the question. This question is asking you, what are the determinants of national interests? Examine in the context of India's foreign policy priorities. So basically, there are 3 parts in this question. One, what is national interest? Though question is not directly asking for it, it's always good to explain the concept. So explaining what is national interest can be one part of the answer. Second, you will talk about the factors, the determinants which we have discussed. One by one, point by point, you will discuss the determinants and you will try to add examples from the Indian context to explain these determinants of India's national interests. These are the 3 parts in your question. So start your answer by defining what do you mean by national interests. Give a simple explanation in your own words. Don't mug up the definition. Don't look at these standard textbook definitions. From whatever you have understood, try to explain this in your own words. Make it a genuine, original answer. Don't copy directly from some notes or from these slides that I'm giving you. Understand the concept, try to write it in your own words. So define the word national interest, and in the body, you can explain the determinants one by one. 1 to 6. We discussed a total of 6 determinants. So break it down into paragraphs or pointers and discuss each one of them and add sufficient examples to explain each determinant from the Indian context, from India's foreign policy priorities. Then conclude your answer. Conclusion should be that India will always look to protect, promote its national interest. That our foreign policy is designed and it should always aim to protect and promote our national interest. You can even quote that there are no permanent friends, no permanent enemies, only permanent interests. You can even say interests will keep on evolving. Some remain static, but some interests will keep on changing. So this is what you will mention in the conclusion to give a logical end to the answer. So I hope you've understood how to approach such questions. So use this approach and try to practice your answer writing. Now let's look at the next important concept. What is diplomacy and what do you really mean by international relations? I know these are very simple terms. You come across these terms every day in your newspapers, in your current affairs. But can you really define what is diplomacy? Can you really explain what is international relations? So let's understand this. Let's break it down. It's a very small topic, won't take much of your time. But later we will look at practice questions so that the concept will become completely ingrained into your memory. See, diplomacy, it is essentially a tool of your foreign policy. If foreign policy is an instrument for the government to protect, promote our national interests, diplomacy is the tool through which the government is protecting and promoting your national interests. Diplomacy refers to the art of negotiations. It's essentially an art. How do you talk to a country? How do you engage with them? How do you open talks with them? How do you negotiate with them? Because diplomacy is what will prevent wars and conflicts. If you don't want to get dragged into unnecessary wars and conflicts, diplomacy has to work. Diplomacy has to succeed. The diplomatic route is the peaceful path. It provides the path to peace. It maintains stability. So, the art of negotiating with foreign governments, with the leaders of foreign governments, with the officials of foreign governments, that art in practice is what we refer to as diplomacy. Are you getting my point? It is a tool of foreign policy to pursue the interests of our nation, ensure peaceful global relations, and it requires the art of negotiating with others, talking to others, building a dialogue with them, maintaining a friendship. In fact, this applies to your personal life as well, right? Don't you engage in some form of diplomacy with your family, your friends, right? You maintain a certain relationship, a cordial relationship, or affection based, love based relationship. You try to talk out the issues that you have, you try to resolve any conflicts. So, those who are good at expressing themselves, they'll be able to maintain better relations. The same applies for international relations. The art, the art of negotiating, it doesn't come to every country. If your government has a well established foreign policy rooted in strong principles, if it has a well uh, groomed leadership and a cadre of diplomats who are well seasoned, experienced, right? They will be able to lead these talks and negotiations representing the nation, representing the interests of the country, and they will engage in these artful, tactful negotiations. And this is how you further your foreign policy. This is how, through diplomacy, through foreign policy, the government will be able to protect and promote our national interests. So, this is how you can explain what is diplomacy. Clear? Now, what do you mean by international relations? What is it exactly? What is IR? See, IR can be seen from a theoretical perspective and from a practical perspective. In theory, IR is basically an academic subject. It is part of political science. That's why your optional in UPSC exam is PSIR, Political Science and International Relations. Now, in political science, what do? You basically study the political systems of different countries. You study the constitutions, the polity of different nations, and you compare them. Correct? you're studying the polity, the constitution of different nations, and you engage in a comparative analysis. Like, how does Indian constitution compare with the American constitution? How does Indian polity compare with UK's political setup? That comparative study and analysis is political science. One subset of political science is international relations. So if political science is like the universal set, then IR is a subset of political science. So as an academic discipline, it is one of the academic disciplines within political science. So in international relations, in theory, you basically study the foreign policy of your own country and you compare this with foreign policy of other nations. That is exactly what we are doing, right? As civil services aspirants, you're studying international relations. I'm teaching you international relations. So we are engaged in an academic exchange, a theoretical exchange where we study the concepts, the theories, and connect that with current developments. We try to make sense of what's happening in the world by using the theories and concepts of PSIR. This academic endeavor is what we refer to as international relations in theory. Is that clear? So, the study of foreign relations, the study of foreign policy of different countries, understanding the global exchanges, the global developments from a theoretical viewpoint is international relations. But in practice, IR is very different. In practice, foreign policy in action, where the foreign relations are actually conducted and maintained, that becomes international relations. For example, India's ties with the US, how Indian diplomats engage with American diplomats, how India engages with China, how India works with Pakistan or against Pakistan if required. So, the way in which we actually conduct our foreign relations in practice, this is international relations in practice, foreign policy in action. So, the government and diplomats of your country, they will practice IR. So, what we study as theory, me as a teacher, you as students, we are simply studying the theory part of it. We are not practicing it. But if you put in your effort, if you concentrate, study well, and clear this exam, join the IFS, Indian Foreign Service, you will become a career foreign service officer. You will get to represent India. You will get to practice foreign policy. You will become a practitioner. You will not just remain an academician or a student who's studying the theory, but once you enter the foreign services of India, you will practice foreign policy in action. Are you getting my point? So international relations can be defined from two perspectives: the theoretical perspective, the academic perspective. Yeah. So one, you essentially study from a theoretical academic viewpoint. The other, you practice it. You actually engage in those talks and negotiations, protecting the interests of your country. As a diplomat, as someone who's representing the nation officially, right? You'll be standing up and protecting the interests of your nation. So that is foreign policy in action, the IR in practice. Clear? So if this simple concept is understood, can you take up this practice question? Can you please try to answer this one? Read the question carefully. From a theoretical perspective, who can be considered as a diplomat? Three options are given. Can you tell me who amongst them can be considered as a diplomat of a nation? Would it be just the career foreign service officers? That is, in the case of India, it could be the IFS cadre that we are referring to. Or is it only the ambassadors and high commissioners who are called as diplomats? And can president of the country, prime minister, the ministers, can they also be referred to as diplomats? What do you think? What's the right answer? Okay. Some are saying D, some are saying A, but most of them are saying A. Okay, let me explain this. Now, if I take a narrow view, if I strictly go by the textbook definition of who is a diplomat, it often refers to career foreign service officers who have opted for foreign service as their career choice. They are referred to as the diplomats of a nation, right? And it could include ambassadors and high commissioners who may be from foreign service, may not be from foreign service as well. The ambassador or the high commissioner who represents our country in another country, who leads the Indian mission in a foreign country. They may be from foreign service or they may not be from foreign service, but they are treated as part of the diplomatic definition. I mean, they are seen as diplomats of the country. They are officially representing the nation. But if I take a broader view, if I take a broader view of the meaning of diplomat, it will include your president, prime minister, vice president, all the ministers as well. All three can be considered as diplomats when they are officially representing India in their official capacity. If Prime Minister of India is representing India at a summit, let's say G20 summit, don't you think the PM is acting as a diplomat? If, let's say, a cabinet minister or the president of the country, vice president, sometimes they lead delegations to other countries to hold foreign visits, to sign agreements. They are the official envoys, the official representatives of the state. So they have legitimacy. So they can also be considered as diplomats in a broader sense. Now, the question is not telling you whether you should answer from a narrow perspective or from a broader perspective. So you should always prefer the broader perspective. B would be the right answer. All of them can be considered as diplomats when they are officially representing the nation at the global level, when they're engaging with relations with another country or with a global organization, right? They're all diplomats of the nation. It's not just your career foreign service officers or ambassadors and high commissioners, even ministers, the head of state, head of government, who represent the nation in their official capacity will also be considered as diplomats in the broader sense. Since the question is not specific, we will have to take the broader view and D becomes the correct answer. 1, 2, and 3. Clear? Now, look at the mains practice question. Read the question. I'll quickly provide an approach and we can move to the next topic. Examine the domain of international relations from a theoretical and practical standpoint. Very simple, straightforward question. This question may not come in your GS paper, but if you have PSIR as your optional, you can anticipate such a question. It's slightly technical. So, how do you explain IR from the theoretical perspective and practical perspective? So, you can start your answer with an introduction, introducing the world of international relations. You can explain how international relations is essentially the study and practice of foreign policy. It's both. Study of foreign relations is also international relations. Practice of diplomacy, practice of conducting diplomatic negotiations, engaging in foreign policy negotiations is also international relations. So explain this aspect in the introduction, and in the body, break down the theory and the practical part. Separate the two and give a quick definition with an example. See, don't forget, it's a 10-mark question for just 150 words. So you can't waste, you can't write unnecessary things. Be very specific. First, introduce the concept of IR, stating that it's both the study and practice of foreign policy. In the body, you can divide it, break it down. In theory, it's an academic discipline, part of PSIR, and you can explain how academicians and students, they try to make sense of the world. They try to understand foreign policy of different countries and compare them. So this is the theoretical exercise. But in practice, foreign policy in action, where governments, diplomats conduct the foreign relations, this becomes international relations in practice. So give an example, relations of India with some country, right? And then conclude your answer. What will you talk about in the conclusion? Talk about the world of IR. Give a way forward of sorts, that how as an academic discipline, IR is important to understand global geopolitics, and explain why foreign policy in action is important to protect the interests of the nation. You basically connect your introduction with the conclusion so that there is a complete circle which is formed, right? So it's a 150 word answer. Keep it very simple and straightforward. And I'm sure anybody who's understood the topic will be able to write a decent answer for this question. Now let's move on to the next topic. The third one, according to me, one of the most important topic as well. What do you mean by geopolitics? What do you mean by geostrategy? What do you mean by geoeconomics? These are three terms that you often read in newspapers, correct? But do you know the meaning of this? Can you define this? Can you explain this? UPSC will definitely focus on such topics. There can be a mains question given here, if not a prelims question. Let's start with geopolitics. Let me break this down for you. And once you understand geopolitics, it will become easier to understand geostrategy. And then I'll explain geoeconomics. Now, geopolitics, it's basically made up of two words: geography and politics. There are two words, as you can see, you can break it up. Geopolitics is made up of geography and politics. What's the relation? What do you mean by this? Geographical elements such as human geography and physical geography of a country. This will directly influence the politics of that nation, of that region. The study of this is nothing but geopolitics. When you study the geography of a country, the human geography and physical geography, connect that with the political developments and its foreign relations. That is the study of geopolitics. I'll explain this further. I'll break it down. Don't worry. What do you mean by human geography? Human geography is a reference to the demographic profile of a country. For example, what is the country's population? What is the literacy rate? What's the gender ratio of that country? What's the ethnic profile, religious profile, and linguistic profile of a given country? Is it a homogeneous society or is it a multicultural, multi-diverse society? How many ethnicities are there? How many religious groups are there? Don't you think these aspects of human geography will directly influence the politics of that nation? Society is influenced by this. Society influences your internal politics, and this influences your external relations. Now, don't you think Christian countries have a certain set of interests which is common to them? Don't you think Islamic nations have a set of interests which is common to them? Don't you see in countries where different ethnic groups are present, there is a rivalry, sometimes tensions and clashes between them? Like, for example, the Sinhala Buddhist majority in Sri Lanka and how they have oppressed and targeted the Tamil minorities. Didn't that lead to the civil war? Hasn't that had an impact on India? Hasn't India gotten involved in the ethnic divide of Sri Lanka? So, when you understand human geography of a country, you will better understand the politics of that nation. So, as future diplomats, this is an important lesson for you. Let's say you enter the IFS or you enter the intelligence services of India and you go on to perform these strategic roles. If you, let's say, occupy these key positions, and I genuinely hope all of you do, you will be expected to have a great insight into the country or region you're dealing with. How will you understand the developments of a foreign country without studying its demography, without becoming a master of the geography of that place? Understood? That's the reason why these subjects are part of your syllabus. Understanding the human profile, the demographic profile is absolutely critical. Don't you think population size plays a role in the size of the economy of that nation? For example, there are few developed economies which are dealing with the aging population. Countries like Japan, Italy, South Korea, Russia, they are dealing with the problem of aging population. Their population is dropping. Don't you think this will affect their economy, their military strength, their geopolitical influence? Whereas India, the world's largest country in terms of population, the most populous, we are enjoying our demographic dividend right now. Don't you think this is directly contributing to our economic rise? So, understanding the population profile, the different parameters of demography will actually help you become a better diplomat, a better intelligence officer, a better civil servant. Understood? So, studying the human geography of a country, understanding its linkages with the politics of that country, is the study of geopolitics. Same with physical geography. The physical geographical features of a nation. This could be the mountain ranges which are present, the forests, the rivers, the seas and the oceans to which a country is connected, the straits, gulf, or the isthmus which is present in a country or around a country. Whatever you have studied in physical geography, the physical geographical features of a nation will eventually determine its place in the global order. Are you getting my point? Some countries have a higher importance in international relations just because of their location, just because of their physical features. Take, for example, Singapore, such a small city state, smaller than most Indian cities in size and population. But still, Singapore is extremely critical at the global level. It holds great strategic significance. Why? Because Singapore dominates over the Strait of Malacca, which is a choke point through which most of the global maritime trade is passing through. This is the reason why physical geography is important. Look at India's physical geography. Look at the subcontinent. It's because of the shape of India, the physical features of India, we have direct open access to the seas and the oceans. We're surrounded with three sides water, Bay of Bengal, Arabian Sea, Indian Ocean, giving us unprecedented access to the Indo-Pacific. Since ancient times, throughout medieval period and in modern contemporary era, India has been a prominent country, a prominent region, civilization, because we have this open access to the seas and the oceans. Because when you have access to seas and oceans, you can trade with faraway parts of the world. You can go on expeditions, reach other countries, get raw materials, find new markets. So those countries which have a large coastline, right, they have a natural economic advantage. Similarly, those countries which are landlocked, which are surrounded by land on all sides, which do not open to any sea or ocean, they have a natural economic disadvantage. So, studying the geographical features of a country will help you understand the politics of that nation and eventually understand the international relations of that country. The study of this is called geopolitics. And when you apply this in real world, in practice, when you try to change human and physical geography of a region to suit your interests, you are engaging in geopolitics. You might have heard experts often say countries play a geopolitical game. Why do they call it a game? It is referred to as a game or a great game because big powers have the ability, they have the resources, the capability to change geography itself. They can play with your population. India, for example, can play with the population profile of a small country. For example, we can instigate a minority group by funding them, sponsoring them to rebel against the majority, to create a division and exploit that to our advantage. That's what US has been doing in many countries. They exploit the human geography. They basically pit one religion against another, one ethnic group against another. Don't you think they're playing with the geography, the human geography of that country? Similarly, you can overcome physical geographical limitations. Landlocked country can be given access to the sea route by creating agreements, by creating a road corridor or a railway corridor. You can connect a landlocked nation with open seas and oceans. If mountains are blocking a country's trade route, you can dig through the mountains, create tunnels. So, through such infrastructure development, you can overcome geographical challenges. Geopolitics is like a game. You can engage in geopolitics by trying to alter the human physical geography of a place. So, by studying human physical geography, you will better understand the politics of that place, of that country, understand the international relations of that country. That is the study of geopolitics. Now, let me give a good example for this. Let's take Afghanistan. Look at the map of Afghanistan here. Look at its geography. Look at both physical geography of Afghanistan and human geography of Afghanistan. One thing which immediately comes to our mind when you look at the map is that Afghanistan is landlocked, surrounded by land on all sides. So I just explained being landlocked in today's world, in a globalized world, is a big economic disadvantage. Don't you think so? Afghanistan's economy has been curtailed because of the country being landlocked. That is the physical feature of Afghanistan. Landlocked nations will have to depend on their neighbors. So Afghanistan becomes dependent on Iran, on Pakistan to access the Arabian Sea. This gives Pakistan a leverage against Afghanistan. Pakistan has been able to use and misuse Afghanistan to create problems for India because of this reason. Are you getting my point? Look at the physical geography as well. Northern parts of Afghanistan is largely mountainous, dominated by the Hindu Kush mountains, but it is very rich in resources. The northern mountainous region and also the central plains, they are blessed with resources, including mineral resources. Whereas southern parts of Afghanistan, largely the plain area, which is very arid or desert like conditions, it is quite conducive for cultivation of certain crops. This has allowed the warlords in Afghanistan to grow opium. And Afghanistan has become one of the world's largest opium producing nations. It's a major narcotic producer, narcotic trafficking hub. That's why Afghanistan is part of the Golden Crescent region. Geography plays a big role here. Look at the human geographical elements. Northern parts of Afghanistan, especially the mountainous region over here around Herat, Kunduz, and Mazar-e-Sharif, it is dominated by the northern tribes, which are linked with Central Asia. For example, the Tajiks, Uzbeks, Turks, Hazaras, and the others. So these northern tribes are smaller in number, but they dominate the northern parts and they have links with Central Asia, historical links. In southern parts of Afghanistan, southern, eastern, and today even western parts of Afghanistan, it is dominated by the Pashtun tribe, the Pashtun ethnic tribe, which is also found on the other side of the border in Pakistan. So there is a history of rivalry, enmity between the Pashtuns and the Tajiks, the Uzbeks, and the Turks. It is this human divide which was exploited by United States in 1979 when they funded Pakistan to create Afghan Mujahideen by radicalizing the Pashtun community. Because in 1979, the Soviet Union had invaded the country during the Cold War period to protect communist influence, to counter the spread of Western influence. USSR had invaded Afghanistan because USSR was a neighbor at that point. It had direct borders with Afghanistan. So USSR invaded the country and US exploited this opportunity. They worked with Pakistan, pumped money, drugs, and weapons into the hands of the Pashtuns. The CIA of the US worked closely with Pakistan's ISI, and they were instrumental in establishing or in creating the Afghan Mujahideen as a resistance against the Soviet occupation. To basically counter and challenge the Soviet forces, Afghan Mujahideen was raised. So religion was misused. Religion was twisted by Pakistan and US in collusion. Saudi Arabia was also part of the alliance. European countries were part of the alliance as they were all opposed to USSR. See how geopolitics can play a big role. How these vested interests can misuse faith, ethnicity, and the human divisions, the social divisions, and they can aggravate the divides to suit their national interests. This is what you mean by playing geopolitics as a game. For the Americans, for Saudi, for Pakistan, for Europeans, this was a game, a great game. They were playing with Russia, with Soviet Union. And you all know the outcome, what happened later. Because of this, terror ecosystem was created, a terror infrastructure was set up. Pakistan became the master of covert warfare. After USSR was defeated, after Soviet troops retreated from here, the Americans forgot about Afghanistan, neglected the region. Pakistan exploited this to its advantage. Pakistan used the remnants of the Mujahideen, the same terrorist infrastructure, to fund and sponsor the Khalistan movement in Punjab in 1980s. Later, Kashmir insurgency and terrorism in Jammu and Kashmir. So there is a direct link between the civil war in Afghanistan and our internal problems in Punjab and Jammu and Kashmir. And Pakistan was that common link. Just see how these things are connected. When Taliban rose to power for the first time in 1996, Pakistan was backing the Taliban. Taliban was a byproduct of Afghan Mujahideen. The radical student leaders of the Mujahideen, they emerged and set up a new radical political organization called the Taliban, a Pashtun dominated organization. So after USSR was kicked out of the country, Mujahideen leaders and Afghan warlords were fighting amongst themselves to control power. So the young student leaders of Taliban, backed by Pakistan, established this new entity. And eventually they toppled the government and the leaders and captured power, turned Afghanistan into a radical state. It became a flourishing ground for anti-India terrorist groups because Taliban back then was like a puppet for Pakistan. So as Taliban became hostile to India, as it was sheltering anti-India terrorist groups, India worked with Russia and Iran to sponsor the northern tribes. India, Russia, Iran, which considered Taliban as a threat. Because see, Iran was a Shia power, right? And Taliban was Sunni. So Iran anticipated a threat from a Sunni Taliban. Russia obviously had grudge against the Taliban because Russia was the successor of USSR. Taliban was the byproduct of Afghan Mujahideen, which had defeated USSR. Russia wanted to curtail the spread of radicalism towards Central Asia and the other parts of Russia. India had a common interest because Pakistan was using Taliban to support Lashkar-e-Toiba, Jaish-e-Mohammed and the others. So India worked with Russia and Iran covertly to sponsor the northern tribes, to fund them, to arm them with weapons. So northern tribes could collectively fight the Taliban. So this is how great games are played. This is what you mean by geopolitics. Understanding human geography and physical geography to better understand the international relations. Try to manipulate them. Try to play with human geographical elements and physical geographical elements so that your interests can be protected. This is what every country does. Now, what is geostrategy? Is it something completely different? No. Geostrategy is connected to geopolitics. It comes under geopolitics. Now, when you understand the geography of a place, if there are any geographical hurdles which is preventing you from achieving your national interest, you can try to alter the geography itself by strategizing. You can try to alter the geography to suit your interest, to overcome the geographical hurdles. This strategy is geostrategy, where a country tries to protect its long-term strategic influence. Could be security influence, economic influence. If you didn't understand the definition, don't worry. I'll give an example. Since we were talking about Afghanistan, let's continue the same topic. Let's continue with the same example. Now, did you know that India, Afghanistan were supposed to share a direct land border? Officially, we claim to have a small border with Afghanistan over here, right? Because the whole of J&K, as it existed in 1947, belongs to India. That is the correct claim of India. But in reality, we don't have this connection. Why? Because Pakistan has illegally occupied our territory, which we call as Pakistan occupied Kashmir. Now imagine, just hypothetically, let's imagine Pakistan had not illegally occupied our territory. Then India, Afghanistan would have this direct border, small border of 96 to 100 kilometers. This would have linked India directly with this narrow corridor called the Wakhan corridor. From Gilgit-Baltistan region over here, we could have directly accessed Afghan territory via the Wakhan corridor. This narrow land corridor would have been the direct land connection. But unfortunately, as Pakistan has illegally occupied this Indian territory, the POK region, we don't have this border on the ground in reality. Since 1947, we have never had that direct access. But few years ago, from 2001 to 2021, when Afghanistan was under a civilian government supported by the US. India was very actively involved in the country. We invested $3 to $4 billion in Afghanistan. India gave a lot of funds for reconstruction efforts. As I told you, we built the Afghan parliament in Kabul. We built a hydropower dam project, the Salma Dam. We built a road, the Zaranj Dilaram Road. We funded schools and hospitals in Afghanistan. So India was one of the biggest development partners, and India got very close to the Afghan civilian government. And Afghan government was very eager to share its resources with India. As I told you, Afghanistan is blessed with resources from iron ore to precious minerals. And from Afghanistan, don't forget you can access Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, and the entire Central Asia region, which is also blessed with resources. Kazakhstan has uranium, one of the world's largest uranium reserves. Turkmenistan has vast reserves of natural gas. Tajikistan, Kyrgyzstan, Uzbekistan, they are also having all types of precious metals and minerals, including hydropower as well. And India has fantastic relations with Central Asian countries. But the only problem is there is no connectivity. This is a geographical hurdle. Are you getting my point? It's a physical limitation, a limitation of physical geography. Since India doesn't have direct access to Wakhan corridor, we can't connect directly with Afghanistan and Central Asia. So India had to overcome this hurdle. We had to break this geographical barrier. And what did we do? We came out with a geostrategy. What is this geostrategy of India? We worked with Iran to develop the strategic Chabahar port. India pumped millions to develop the strategic Chabahar port near Hormuz Strait. And from Chabahar, through Iran, we can connect with Afghanistan and extend the connectivity to Central Asia as well. I told you, right? We already had built a road in Afghanistan, Zaranj Dilaram Highway. From Chabahar port of Iran, we could connect with this Indian built highway in Afghanistan through road and rail networks and further extend this into Central Asia, giving us a bypass without depending on Pakistan, right? Some of you might suggest, why don't we ask Pakistan for access? Problem is, Pakistan may not give that access. Even if it gives, it's not reliable. What if tomorrow tensions increase and Pakistan cuts off access? Or what if Pakistan uses terrorist groups to target the trade route? You can't rely on such a country. We had to bypass Pakistan, and Chabahar port project. It basically gave India that opportunity to link with Afghanistan and Central Asia and establish that physical geographical connectivity. So this is what you mean by geostrategy. You overcome your geopolitical hurdles by altering the geography itself. Understood? Is this point clear? Now, what is geoeconomics? Geoeconomics is slightly different. In geoeconomics, you use your economic strength, your economic influence as a leverage for statecraft. Let's say India is a major economy, right? If we can punish a rival country through economic methods, maybe by stopping the supply of some items or by imposing sanctions on them, which United States does against its rivals, such usage of economic leverage for statecraft, for foreign policy, is essentially geoeconomics. For example, Malaysia and Turkey, they both created problems for India recently. They sided with Pakistan and they started meddling with our internal matters, including Kashmir. They would support Pakistan on the Kashmir issue at United Nations, at Organization of Islamic Cooperation. Now, this was a direct threat for India. So India used its economic leverage. We completely stopped palm oil imports from Malaysia, which dealt a severe blow to Malaysian economy. Malaysia is one of the top exporters of palm oil. India is one of the biggest consumers. We stopped the imports, delivering a punishment, an economic punishment. This worked to an extent with Turkey as well. Though Turkey remains to be pro-Pakistan and hostile to India, we stopped the wheat export to Turkey. This is India using its economic leverage. When China carried out incursions in Ladakh and triggered the standoff, we blocked Chinese applications on security grounds. We blocked China's investments into our country. We tried to reduce imports of Chinese goods. This is a country using economic leverage as part of its foreign policy. This is called geoeconomics. Or the FTAs we are working out with other countries. You must be aware, we have recently signed a free trade agreement with United Kingdom, right? We are negotiating with European Union. We have signed FTAs with UAE and other important trade partners. So this is again using your economic strength, your economic influence to shape the relations with another country. This is what we mean by geoeconomics. Using trade wars, sanctions, technology based competition, trade agreements, integrating your supply chains. This is called geoeconomics. So, American tariffs against India, for example, is part of geoeconomics. US sanctions on Iran and Russia is part of geoeconomics. The diversification of supply chains that India, Japan, Australia, and others are pushing for to reduce their dependency on China, that is also part of geoeconomics. Here, these are the tools used in geoeconomics, using sanctions, using tariff wars, diversifying the supply chain, signing trade agreements, right? Or using your technological advantage. For example, how countries are leveraging 5G technology or the control they have over the tech companies of the world. You see that in the world of AI, how there is a geopolitical race between US and China. So when you leverage your economic strength for statecraft, for diplomacy, that becomes geoeconomics. So I hope this concept is clear to everyone. Now take up this practice question. There might be a question asked on these lines. So read the question carefully. Consider the following statements. Geostrategy is primarily concerned with the study of geography and its influence on international relations, while geopolitics is about the application of that study through military and diplomatic means. Is this correct or not? Then second statement says geoeconomics involves using economic instruments like trade, sanctions, infrastructure projects as tools of foreign policy to achieve your strategic goals. Which of the statements is or are correct? What's the right answer? Very good. Tejaswini, Karan have already given the right answer. Very good. Statement 1 is wrong. Statement 2 is correct. Why? Because in statement 1, geostrategy, geopolitics have been interchanged. Geopolitics is the study of geography and its influence on international relations. That's not geostrategy. Geostrategy is about application of your geopolitical knowledge through military diplomatic means to overcome your geographical hurdles. So this has been interchanged. That's why it is wrong. Clear? Geoeconomics is correctly defined. So second statement is right. 2 only. Option B becomes the correct answer. Now, can you take up this mains question? It's a very interesting question. Look at the statement. Try to understand this carefully. Geopolitics provides the context. Geostrategy provides the plan. And geoeconomics provides the leverage. Discuss this statement in the context of India's evolving role in the Indo-Pacific region. The first statement is actually very beautifully crafted. Geopolitics gives you the context. It gives you the geographical, political context with regard to a country. By understanding geopolitics, you're basically dissecting the geography and politics of a place. Using this context, you come out with a geostrategy, with a plan, like India's Chabahar port. First, we understood the geography of Pakistan and Afghanistan. We understood the political and foreign policy problems we had, and we strategized and we came out with a plan, which is Chabahar port, which is your geostrategy. Then geoeconomics gives you that economic influence, the leverage over another country. That's what the statement means, right? So now you're asked to discuss the statement in the context of Indo-Pacific region as an example. Let's see how many of you can do this. Take the Indo-Pacific, look at the geography, look at the map. Try to spend some time in understanding the physical and human geographical dimensions of Indo-Pacific and see how you can apply that to this particular question, right? What is the geopolitics that you see in Indo-Pacific? What is geostrategy from India in the Indo-Pacific? What's the economic leverage we have in the Indo-Pacific? This is what you have to discuss. It's quite simple when you break down the statement. So let's hope that all of you will make use of this discussion and try to practice your answer writing. Now, coming to the next topic, very, very interesting topic, idealism versus realism. See, in the world of international relations, in the world of PSIR, there are two distinct schools of thought. You have the idealist school of thought and the realist school of thought. Both are completely different, almost diametrically opposite. So let's understand, what do you mean by idealism in foreign policy and what do you mean by realism in foreign policy? It's a very simple concept, but you should be able to break it down, explain this, and give examples to it. In idealism, those who believe in idealism, those who practice the idealistic school of thought in foreign policy, they believe that ideals are more important. Morals, values, ethics, principles. They believe that these aspects have to be upheld, not just in their own country, but around the world. Let's say there is a leader in one country who believes that human rights will always have to be protected, not only in his own country, but across the world as well. So it's very idealistic. It's something, uh, it's a desire to have an ideal world, a world where humans are presumed to be good. Across the world, there is a presumption in this school of thought that humans in general are good natured, and by appealing to their instincts, by appealing to their good side, you can convince everyone to maintain peace, maintain stability, cooperate with each other. In idealism, cooperation is the crux, is the focal point. It is believed that countries can work together, protect each other's interests without threatening the other. The belief here is that if you follow a value based approach, a principled approach in foreign policy, protecting human rights, democratic rights, and if you stand up for these principles across the world in your foreign policy, this is considered to be the ideal implementation of a foreign policy that is rooted in ethics, morals, and principles. So leaders like JFK from US, Pandit Nehru from India, right? They were considered to be idealistic leaders. They were practitioners of the idealistic school of thought. Clear? But the opposite is realism, the realist school of thought. See, there is no right or wrong here. In fact, in the world of geopolitics, there is no right or wrong. It's not a binary world, it's not black and white. The world exists in the gray areas. Got it? So, neither idealism is the best thought or nor realism is the best thought. It depends on circumstances, on case to case basis. But we are just trying to understand, compare the two. So don't assume idealism is automatically bad or good, or realism is the best thing to follow in foreign policy. Sometimes you need a mix of both. That's what India's foreign policy has been. India's foreign policy has a fine mix of idealism and realism. In realism, you focus on pragmatic goals, you focus on self interest, you focus on achieving what's practically possible. Here, the inherent assumption is that the world is made up of selfish people and selfish governments. So you can't change the world. You can't be idealistic. At least take care of your own interests. Protect yourself first. Then think about the world. So this approach of focus on self-interest, almost being selfish, is what is referred to as the realist school of thought. So practitioners like Henry Kissinger, right, and several global leaders today, they are perfect examples of being driven by the realist school of thought. They care about themselves. They care about their country, their interests. The interests of others will come later. Now, for example, look at India's policy towards Myanmar, or look at India's policy towards Israel, towards Russia. Have we ever criticized any of these governments directly? Has India directly criticized Myanmar's military regime for the violence? In Myanmar, human rights violations are happening from 1962. India knows that. We are very well aware of it. But we remain silent. We deliberately choose to remain silent. We don't want to speak about it. Why? Not because we are scared. No. It's a deliberate choice made by India. Since Myanmar is strategically important for us, we want good relations with the military regime. Since we can't change the ground reality, India's intervention will overnight not change the mind of the military leaders in Myanmar. Overnight, they'll not care about democracy and human rights just because we are pressurizing them. So instead of losing the military regime as a friend, better to cultivate relations with them, let them handle their internal matters. I know it sounds selfish, it sounds cold hearted, but unfortunately, that's how the real world is. The world of geopolitics sometimes is cold hearted. For example, in Ukraine, we know Russia has broken international law by violating Ukraine's sovereignty. It has committed war crimes. But we remain silent. We don't blame Russia. We don't criticize Russia explicitly. Why? Russia is critical for Indian interests. Same with Israel. India knows what Israel has been doing. The kind of atrocities that have been committed in Gaza, in Palestinian territory, the kind of destabilization Israel has caused in West Asia. And we also know what Iran has done, the way in which Iran has sponsored extremism and destabilized the region, targeting Israel. We know both sides, but we remain silent. We don't blame Iran, we don't blame Israel. We just call upon them to end the conflict. This is realism in practice. India is very realistic about its goals, meaning we are self centered. We look after our interests. Sometimes this is the best approach. There's nothing wrong with that. Sometimes you have to be idealistic, sometimes you have to be realistic. Good foreign policy requires a mix of both. Clear? There are drawbacks on both sides. Being too idealistic also has drawbacks. Being too realistic also has drawbacks. So what you need is a fine mix of both. Are you getting my point? I have given you enough examples as well, so you can easily understand these concepts. Now, look at the slide here on your screen. All the pointers that are needed to differentiate between idealism and realism has been listed over here. So this is my ready-made notes for you. There is a possibility of a question being asked, especially in PSIR and maybe in GS paper 2. You never know. UPSC might ask you to define these schools of thought, idealism and realism, and what's the difference between them. So please make a note of these points. Let's repeat this. Let's revise this once quickly. The primary difference is the difference with regard to the nature of international politics, followed in idealism and realism. In idealism, there is a belief in cooperation, a belief in morality, law, institutions, principles, and ethics. In realism, the belief is that the world is an arena for conflict. The world is in chaos. Everybody is looking after their own interests. That is the assumption that's made here. So countries will be driven only by their national agenda, their own self-interest. There is a core assumption made here. The assumption in idealism is that human nature is essentially good, that humans around the world have a good side. War is not the option. Dialogue, diplomacy is the way forward. Whereas in realism, it is presumed that all humans are selfish inherently. By nature, humans are selfish and greedy. This is a presumption made over here. So at least protect your own interests and then think about the rest of the world. So don't preach to the world. Don't push idealistic approach. Instead, look after your own interests, even if someone is doing wrong. So that is the whole concept here. As I said, there is no right or wrong. It's very subjective, right? What is correct according to US and Israel may not be correct according to China or India. So this is very subjective. So in realism, this is the presumption here that humans are selfish. Governments will be selfish. So why shouldn't we also be selfish and protect our country, protect our interests instead of first thinking about other countries? Then, with regard to role of institutions, in idealism, There's a lot of faith in global organizations like UN. That's why Prime Minister Nehru placed a lot of faith in the UN when it came to Kashmir issue, right? But idealism can backfire as well, as we saw how UN was misused, how it was used to eventually favor Pakistan. So in realism, there is no belief in international institutions. In realism, countries want to push their own agenda through bilateral agreements and deals. They will undermine global institutions. That's what big, powerful countries do. US, China, European countries, Russia. Do you think they really respect international law? Do you think they really uphold UN principles? No, they themselves violate them because they know that if you're not realistic, right, they can't protect their own interests. So they preach for everyone else. They tell the world that follow democratic principles, protect human rights, while they themselves will violate them. So the policy orientation is completely different. In idealism, the advocacy is for peace, dialogue, negotiations, whereas in realism, the focus is on military preparedness, military aggression, diplomatic pressure tactics, economic sanctions. These are the tools you see in realism. These are some fundamental differences that you can bring out and explain if there is a question on this particular topic. Now, you tell me what you think about this in the comments. Okay, this is a small assignment for you. In foreign policy, is idealism the best or realism? What is your take on this? What is your opinion? Should a country like India be idealistic or realistic? Think about it carefully. Don't always assume realism is the best approach. Just because it will protect your interests, don't think that that is the right approach. In the long term, idealism will have better returns. So think about this carefully and tell me in the comments what is the right approach, being idealistic or being realistic. Now take up this practice question. Read the question carefully. Consider the following statements. Idealism assumes human nature is inherently cooperative, whereas realism assumes human nature is selfish and power seeking. I'll give you the answer because we just discussed this. Statement one is absolutely right. Next, realism places emphasis on balance of power and national interest, while idealism focuses on international law, morality, and institutions. Again, a correct statement. I just explained. In idealism, there is preference given for international law, global institutions, morality, which you don't see in realism. Third statement says both idealism, realism equally prioritize international organizations like UN. This is obviously incorrect. It's only in idealism there is respect for international institutions like the UN. In realism, there is no such respect towards multilateral platforms. So 3 is wrong. 1 and 2 only. Option A becomes the correct answer. Now, can you take up this mains practice question based on what we have discussed? Idealism seeks to transform the world, whereas realism seeks to survive in it. A very philosophical statement as well. Who knows, this might come as an essay topic. Don't you think so? This statement can be given as an essay topic. Idealism seeks to transform the world, whereas realism seeks to survive in it. In idealism, the idealist believes that the world can be changed, that everyone's mind can be changed, that everybody is good hearted. Whereas in realism, the focus is on self survival. First, you survive, then take care of the world. Then think about others. First, think about yourself. So, this is starkly contrasting approach. So, this can be a great essay topic because it presents a completely different, diametrically opposite approach in both sides. So, this can come as an essay topic. Critically examine the statement with reference to India's foreign policy evolution since independence. So, with the help of examples from the days of Prime Minister Nehru, Prime Minister Indira Gandhi, PV Narasimha Rao, Prime Minister Vajpayee, Manmohan Singh, Prime Minister Modi, using their leadership, using their approach, can you explain when India has been idealistic and when India has been realistic? I gave you those examples. For example, India believed in the UN when we took Kashmir issue to the UN. That was an idealistic approach of India. India genuinely believed China can be a friend, right? Prime Minister Nehru believed China can be a good friend and propagated the idea of Hindi Chini bye bye. But later it backfired on India when China showed its true colors. At the same time, India has been very pragmatic, very realistic. For example, you take Lal Bahadur Shastri's leadership during 1965 war, how India pushed back Pakistan. Take the role of Prime Minister Indira Gandhi in breaking Pakistan into two parts, in liberating Bangladesh, or Indira Gandhi's approach towards dealing with US and the Western pressure on our nuclear program and space program. The policies of PV Narasimha Rao, Vajpayee, Manmohan Singh and Modi reflects this choice that we have made. Sometimes we have been idealistic, sometimes we have been realistic. So can you give enough examples to explain this? Bring out the differences between the two. Now moving on, the fifth topic, again small topic but quite interesting. Hard power versus soft power. I told you earlier that we'll be discussing the concept of soft power in comparison to hard power. So, what are these terms that we come across in international relations and geopolitics? Let's quickly understand, what do you mean by hard power? What do you mean by soft power? See, geopolitics is all about power projection. The status of a country in the global community depends on the power that you're able to project. If you have the strongest economy, the mightiest military, you will be able to project maximum power. Correct? So this type of power based on your economic might, based on your military strength, and if you're forcing others to respect you, coercing them, threatening them, using your economic military strength as a leverage to teach others a lesson or to deter them, this is the exercise of hard power. For example, the gunboat diplomacy of US. How US has threatened countries using its aircraft carriers, using its mighty navy. Again, 1971 comes to mind. The then American President Nixon, with his national security advisor Henry Kissinger, they held a deep bias against India, hatred against India. They had sided with Pakistan during the 71 war. They tried to threaten Indira Gandhi and the Indian government by dispatching the American Navy into Bay of Bengal. The US 7th Fleet of the US Navy, a carrier battle group led by an aircraft carrier, a nuclear powered aircraft carrier, accompanied with vessels and submarines carrying nuclear weapons on board, were pushed into Bay of Bengal to threaten India. This was a coercive tactic to blackmail India, pressurize India to end the war to protect Pakistan. This is a display of hard power. Take, for example, India's recent retaliation against Pakistan. After the Uri attacks in 2016, India carried out surgical strikes where Indian special forces infiltrated into POK and targeted the terrorist launch pads. In 2019, after the Pulwama attacks, India carried out the Balkot airstrikes. Indian Air Force breached Pakistani airspace and bombed the terror targets. And more recently, after the deadly Pahalgam attack, India launched a major military operation, Operation Sindoor, through which we struck multiple terror targets. And when Pakistan escalated, we hit back at Pakistan's military bases as well. So, this exercise of military power, usage of economic strength to coerce someone, force and threaten someone to deter them, this is the exercise of hard power. Using sanctions, military threats, and payment threats, this is the exercise of hard power. You are basically coercing them to behave. Now, let me explain this in a much better, simpler, and funnier manner. Let's say you have siblings, right? If you've grown up with an elder, younger sibling, brother, sister, doesn't matter. I'm sure the younger sibling would have been intimidated, coerced, threatened by the elder sibling. Always. Your elder brother or sister, when they wanted their way, they would have beaten you up, they would have threatened you, right? This coercion is nothing but usage of hard power. You, as the younger sibling, you might know that you can't stand up to your elder sibling, you will be scared of them. So you'll oblige to whatever they are saying. Because if you don't do that, your elder sibling threatens to beat you up, or they'll try to blackmail you essentially, right? Essentially bullying. So this is essentially hard power in practice. When you're forcing someone, threatening someone using your strength, soft power is the opposite of this. The concept of soft power was defined by a well known political scientist, Joseph Nye. But the idea of hard and soft power has existed since ancient times. It's not new, it's nothing new. Look at Indian thinkers like Kautilya. Kautilya may not have used terms like hard power and soft power, but Kautilya in his Arthashastra talks about the exact same thing. Kautilya advised the king, sometimes you may have to punish your enemies using your military strength, using your economic strength, or waging a covert war against them, or imposing trade and economic sanctions on them. But according to Kautilya, hard power should be the last resort. Because using hard power will make you a bully. It will not get you respect. It will not get you love. It will not get you affection and goodwill. You tell me, do you really love your elder sibling? Right? Many of you may not genuinely love them because you have the trauma of being bullied by your elder sibling all the time. Right? The same happens in international relations. So Kautilya advised the king never to use hard power as the first option. It should be the last resort. So Kautilya advised the king to rely on the power of persuasion. Persuade someone, attract someone. Let's say you want to go on a trip with your friends and you want your parents' permission and you want to get money from them. Will you go threaten your parents, blackmail them, or will you plead with them, try to attract their attention, try to persuade them? Whatever you do, the tricks, that is basically soft power, right? Or in a relationship, if you're trying to woo a partner, you try to attract them, you try to persuade them. Correct? You don't go threatening them. Maybe that happens in Bollywood movies, but not in real life. Correct? So soft power is that where you persuade someone using your soft influence. So this could be your cultural influence. It could be people to people relationships, right? Your economic assistance. Let's say a country is affected by a disaster. Give them full support during disaster. Provide them disaster management assistance. India has done this repeatedly with Bangladesh, Myanmar, Sri Lanka, many others. Or you provide funds, provide them concessional loans, fund their infrastructure development, or help them during an economic crisis. Look at Sri Lanka when it crashed as an economy. India stood there giving $4 billion worth of support, uplifting the Sri Lankan economy. We are doing the same with Maldives right now. So, this again is soft power influence, funding projects, giving them concessional loans, standing with them during times of difficulty, genuinely helping them with a good heart, and using your cultural symbols, your cultural assets. It could be religion, ethnicity, language. For example, with Nepal, Hinduism, Buddhism is a linkage. Correct? With Sri Lanka as well, Hinduism, Buddhism is a linkage. With Middle Eastern powers, Islam is a common linkage. With some countries, Christianity might be the linkage. So we leverage the ties, the cultural, civilizational ties that we have. And when you use that in your foreign policy, this is soft power projection. Look at the Buddhist Circuit Initiative of India, where India is uh, providing better tourist facilities and infrastructure at Buddhist pilgrimage sites, promoting them to attract Buddhist pilgrims from other countries, from China, from Japan, from Bhutan, from Sri Lanka, from Vietnam, across Asia, in Southeast and East Asia and South Asia. There are many countries where Buddhism is the majority religion or popular religion. So India is the birthplace of Buddhism. So we are leveraging that historical connect, trying to attract pilgrims, attract the tourists to build cultural exchanges and people to people relationship. And that is what will generate soft power influence for you. Look at the appeal of Indian food, Indian music, Indian movies, how our diplomacy promotes this abroad. This is again a part of your soft power diplomacy. So attracting someone, persuading someone through active engagement, through cultural symbols and values. through people to people ties. That is soft power projection. This is what will create the goodwill and the trust in the long term. Whereas hard power might get you support in the immediate future, but this is not long lasting, right? Whatever is gotten through threats and coercion, it will not last long. Either you'll have to keep on threatening the other, right? Or you will end up losing their support. So, in a good foreign policy, you will find a mix of both. Just hard power is not enough, or just soft power is not enough. You need a mix of both. As Kautilya suggested, the strategy of Dam, Dan, Ved, Dand. Essentially, you donate, you try to attract them, you try to win over their support and favor. If that doesn't work, you discriminate between your partners, then threaten them, eventually punish them using your military options. So, war is the last resort, right? Uh, Using your military economic strength is the last resort. But however, it will remain a key part of your foreign policy because there will be some countries which will not learn a lesson, like Pakistan, for example. India has tried negotiating with Pakistan. We have tried opening bridges of friendship with Pakistan. We have made genuine efforts repeatedly. Pakistan doesn't stop its habit of using terrorism against India. Sometimes it becomes necessary to punish Pakistan through covert wars, right? Or through economic means or through military methods. Now, look at the slide here. Take down the difference between hard and soft power based on definition, the different tool sets that are used, the nature of influence that you gain from hard and soft power with examples. The best example for India's hard power would be Operation Sindoor, Balkot airstrikes, surgical strikes, etc. Best example for soft power from India would be the push given to yoga, right? How India is promoting the International Day of Yoga. We got it designated from the UN. We have been giving a push for alternate strands of medicine, the traditional streams of medicine that is under Ayush. How India is promoting pop culture, not just Bollywood, Indian movies in general, right? Indian music gets a lot of support from the government. And be it Ayurveda, which I mentioned under Ayush, plus the assistance we are giving to others. India is rolling out UPI, the digital payment ecosystem, right? We have recently helped countries like Nepal, Sri Lanka, then Gambia, and even Namibia, Nigeria. All of them are looking to adopt India's UPI, right? So this is again an example of India helping other countries, or the disaster management assistance that we provide, the HADR support, humanitarian assistance and disaster relief. We have given the support during COVID-19. Many countries received support from India under Mission Sagar. When our neighbors have witnessed disasters, be it Nepal, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Maldives, Myanmar, and countries beyond our neighborhood as well, even in Africa, Southeast Asia, even hostile countries like Turkey. They've always received disaster management support from India because that is a soft power attempt to create a goodwill and a positive influence. So, based on this, answer this practice question for prelims. Consider the following with regard to hard and soft power. India's use of soft power in diplomacy is a very recent phenomenon. Is this correct or wrong? Soft power helps build long term goodwill and legitimacy, whereas hard power yields quicker short term results. What's the correct statement? What is the right answer? Can you tell me? B. Karan, Tejaswini, Chirag, Shivani, even Hema, all of them are saying B is the right answer. You guys are absolutely right. Statement 1 is wrong and 2 is correct. 2 is obvious. We just discussed the same point. Statement 1 is wrong because we are using soft power in our diplomacy from a very long time, right from 1947. From the moment we became independent, we are leveraging soft power. Take, for example, how India supported the decolonization of African countries. We supported the independence movement of African nations. We gave them a voice at United Nations. We stood against apartheid. We helped in the development of our neighboring countries. India started building roads, bridges, railway lines, and power projects in Nepal, Bhutan, and other neighbors. Isn't that soft power? So we have been doing this from 1947. It's not a recent phenomena. That's why it is incorrect. So two only is the right answer. Now take up this practice question. In the 21st century, soft power is becoming as crucial as hard power in shaping international relations. So ideally, you have to agree with the statement. You can disagree as well, but you need a strong backup argument with examples. But the right approach, according to me, would be to agree with the statement that yes, in today's world, soft power has become as important as hard power. So, good foreign policy should have a mix of both. This has to be your line of argument, but use the right examples to back up this argument. So, discuss the statement in the context of our foreign policy and global influence. So, this is your practice question for mains. Now, coming to the last four topics, bilateralism versus multilateralism. So let's understand this concept as well. What is bilateralism? What is multilateralism? What are the pros and cons of both? And then we will look at some India specific concepts. And after that, we will wind up the session for today. So until now, I hope you guys have enjoyed the session, understood all the topics. We are covering some basic concepts, especially for beginners. So if you're liking it, do press that like button, do share your comments, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. So just stay with me for maybe one more hour. We will be wrapping up all the topics. So this class, this marathon session is more than enough for you to lay a basic foundation for this subject, right? Just spend another 50, 60 minutes and trust me, it's going to be worth it. It's going to be worth your time. Bilateralism versus multilateralism. What are these two things? The word bilateral refers to relations between two countries. When two countries engage with each other, work with each other, let's say India, US, India, Japan, or China, Russia. Whenever two countries engage with each other, build their relationship, sign agreements, and start initiatives between them, this is an example of bilateralism. The word itself tells you bi, meaning two. When two countries, two partners are working together in international relations, that is an example of bilateralism. Multilateralism involves three or more partners. If let's say three countries are working together, or four, five, six countries, or 193 countries are working together, right? That is an example of multilateralism. Clear? Now, both have their own advantages and drawbacks. Again, you can't say bilateralism is the best suited model or multilateralism is the best suited model. Both have their advantages and disadvantages. I'll explain this in very simple terms. Let's say you guys are planning a college trip, okay, with your classmates. Now you tell me, is it easy to go on a trip with the entire class, or is it easier to go on a trip with just your best friend? Tell me what you think is the best approach, A or B. Let's say you have a choice to plan a class trip with your entire class. Let's say 100 students are there. Is it easy to plan a trip with 100 students, or is it easy to go on a trip with just your best friend? Going alone, that's even better. But unfortunately, in international relations, you can't be alone. You need friends, correct? It's easier to work with one friend, right? With one partner. Instead of dealing with the entire class, nothing will be achieved at the end of it. Plans will be made. Eventually, the trip will never happen. I'm sure all of you would have had this experience. Class trips would be planned, group trips would be planned, it will never be executed. At least half of them will not even turn up. But when you make with a plan with smaller group, with especially just two of them, it's easier to execute that. The same thing happens in international relations. In bilateralism, sometimes it is easy to reach an agreement. Why? Because there are only two people involved, two countries, two governments. India, US can arrive at a deal for their trade partnership. India, Japan can arrive at an agreement for their technology partnership. I hope this makes sense. I hope you're getting my point. When just two countries are working with each other, it's always easier to strike deals and agreements and to achieve something substantial, to achieve something concrete. But however, bilateralism can be harmful. It will basically ignore global concerns. Countries will become more inward looking if bilateralism is the norm. Let's say US, Israel, they all work together. They both always have the same approach. They don't care about what happens to the world, what others think. They look after their own interests together, US and Israel. So don't you think that causes a crisis in the world as well? So in bilateralism, when two powerful countries look after their own self-interest and ignore the rest, this again leads to an impact on the others, on the weaker countries of the global south. Developing, underdeveloped countries will be at a weaker standpoint. So this is the advantage, disadvantage of bilateralism. The opposite is true with multilateralism. In multilateralism, it is very difficult to reach consensus. You take climate change negotiations again, for example, WTO talks, for example. There is always a divide at these global platforms where more countries are involved. For example, at United Nations, where all the member states are present, at WTO, it's very difficult to arrive at a consensus. Why do you think climate change convention has not been a true success? Because countries are divided. Even though they arrived at Kyoto Protocol and later Paris Agreement, it's not being properly implemented and followed up. Most of the summits will end as a failure because countries can't come to a common point. But however, in multilateralism, there is equity which can be promoted. Everybody can have a voice. Smallest of the smallest power can have a representation, can have a voice. Imagine a country like Maldives can raise voice at UN. Would Maldives be able to do that in a bilateral engagement? Let's say Maldives is talking to China or talking with United States. These powerful countries will bully Maldives and dominate over this small country. But at United Nations, everybody is equal, right? That is the beauty. So in multilateralism, at least there is inclusivity, equity, where even small, weak countries can have representation. Today, there is something else which is coming up. There is regionalism, there is minilaterals, which we see on the rise. There are region specific groups as well. Apart from bilateralism, there are region specific groups like SARC, ASEAN, European Union, African Union. Countries of a particular region come together to work for the common interests. Look at how European Union has transformed Europe, how SARC has become a failure, right? The regional development is dependent on these regional groups. Countries in that region will become part of such regional associations. ASEAN is a very big success. How Southeast Asia has transformed because of the ASEAN group. This is regionalism for you. Then we have something called minilaterals, which is becoming more popular today. Since we are seeing a decline of multilateralism, countries are becoming more protectionist. They're looking after their own interests. There is a rise of smaller groups, like, for example, Quad. Quad is a minilateral where only four like minded democracies are working together. BRICS is a minilateral. Then there is a trilateral between Russia, India, China. These are examples for minilaterals where three, four countries, five countries work together because they have common interests. They ignore the others and they will work together. So all of them have their advantages and their disadvantages. Complete multilateralism, it is good for giving representation to global south, giving a voice to weak and small countries. But problem is nothing might be achieved. No consensus will be reached at multilateral platforms. Bilateralism is good for some quick initiatives and quick implementation and results. But problem is it will ignore the small powers, doesn't give them a voice. Minilaterals have their advantage again. In smaller groups, you can achieve more, but it will only create exclusive clubs, a club of elite countries, a club of developing nations. This again creates its own problems. So all these methods of engagement, they have their pros, they have their cons. Now, let's look at the prelims question. Please concentrate on this question. This can be asked, something like this can come in the exam. Consider the following. Bilateralism usually allows faster decision making and more customized agreements than multilateralism. Obviously, correct statement. I just explained the same concept. Multilateralism promotes collective action and rule based governance, but often requires consensus, making decision making slower. Also correct. Bilateral agreements are always less important than multilateral ones in shaping foreign policy outcomes. What do you think? Can you tell me? Statement 3, wrong or correct, true or false? Statement number 3, is it true or is it false? Is it correct or incorrect? Let me know quickly. Take a few seconds and let me know what you think is the right answer. Many of you are saying A. Very good, which means statement 3 is incorrect. I just explained neither bilateralism is the best or multilateralism is the best, right? They all have their pros, their cons, their advantages and their disadvantages. So there's no one perfect way of building international relations. Sometimes bilateral ties are better. Sometimes regional ties are better. Sometimes multilateral, minilateral ties are better. So statement 3 is absurd. It's wrong. So 1 and 2 only. Option A becomes the correct answer. So this is your mains question. India's foreign policy today is a careful blend of bilateralism and multilateralism. Discuss with suitable examples. So first give an introduction how the world order is divided based on bilateral ties, multilateral engagement, regional ties. Then in the body, explain each one of them with examples. What is bilateralism? What is regionalism? What is multilateralism? Talk about the rise of minilaterals. Discuss their pros, their cons, and conclude your answer. Clear? Now, coming to the next topic, India's principle of strategic autonomy. Now, we will be specific to India's foreign policy. We will look at some core principles of India's foreign policy, some dimensions of India's foreign policy. That is the last part of my discussion today. What is this principle of strategic autonomy? This is the foundational principle of India's foreign policy that was laid down by Prime Minister Nehru, the first Prime Minister of India. In fact, when Nehru delivered a speech in the Constituent Assembly, when the Constitution of India was being drafted, Prime Minister Nehru made a very important statement regarding foreign relations. He said that a country cannot be truly independent unless and until it has an independent foreign policy. Please take some time to understand the weight of this statement. This was made in 1949 by Prime Minister Nehru. See, India had achieved independence by 1947 from British colonial rule. After 2 years of independence, PM Nehru states to the Constituent Assembly that a country is not independent. We are not truly independent unless and until our foreign policy is independent. Because if some bigger power is pressurizing you, if they are imposing on your country and weakening your sovereignty, it means you're simply a puppet of a bigger power. Then it means you're not truly independent. If you can't make your sovereign choices in foreign relations, then independence has no meaning. Is that clear? This was the statement that was brought out by Prime Minister Nehru, and that underlines the founding ideals of our foreign policy. So credit goes to Prime Minister Nehru for establishing the independent, autonomous nature of our foreign policy. By then, the world was divided in the Cold War era. By 1948, Cold War geopolitics had taken over after the Second World War, and the global order was divided into a bipolar world. On one side, the Western powers, the other side, Eastern communist powers. The West led by US and like-minded capitalist democracies. The East led by USSR along with its communist socialist allies. So in this divided world, India championed a new ideology that was possible because India believed in an independent foreign policy. The principle of strategic autonomy basically states that India is not a puppet of someone. We are not a blind ally of any bigger power. We have our own interests. We will protect and look after our own interests. And in that regard, India will remain independent in its foreign policy decisions. We will not be bullied or forced by someone to change our foreign policy choices according to their interests. Our foreign policy decisions will be based on India's own interest. This has been the fundamental principle, the foundational principle of our foreign policy. More or less, we have followed this from 1947 till now, except for few exceptions here and there. More or less, Indian governments have followed this principle, irrespective of which party is in power, which government, or which leader, right? More or less, we have followed a independent, autonomous foreign policy. So the non-aligned movement, the NAM, which India championed, in itself was an example of this. Today, NAM might have become outdated and irrelevant, but back in 1950s, this was India's biggest contribution to maintain stability in the world. Imagine, during the heights of Cold War, the world was divided. The world was inching towards a third world war, a possible nuclear conflict. India was the one which gave leadership with other like-minded countries to bring a third neutral ideology, that is the ideology of non-alignment. We will neither ally with Western powers nor with the Eastern Communist bloc. And this approach of India, which was supported by the close friends of India, Sukarno from Indonesia was a very close friend of Prime Minister Nehru, Joseph Tito from Yugoslavia, the erstwhile country in Europe, Gamal Abdel Nasser, the founding father nationalist leader of Egypt, then Kwame Nkrumah of Ghana. They were all very good friends with Nehru, and India managed to influence them. They were all newly independent nations as well. So we came together to found the NAM and gave a third neutral ideology to the world, bringing a sense of stability. The world was chaotic, divided, headed towards another war, but we brought stability and some sense into that chaotic world order. So you see this today as well, right? We don't blindly follow someone's orders. There have been some deviations, but it's very rare. We defied the US when we pursued nuclear weapons, right? US in particular was trying to target our nuclear and space program. India stood tall, independently pursued its policies despite being isolated from the world order. Recently, Prime Minister Modi has reiterated India's independent foreign policy. This was in 2018 when US was pushing India to give a military angle to the Quad grouping. US, Japan, Australia, all these countries were pressurizing India to add a military dimension to the Quad because they were trying to use the Quad to counter China and contain China militarily. But this is not in India's interest. India has no history of joining any military clubs. We have never been part of any military alliances. We don't have the habit of targeting one country by working with a group of countries. And the last thing we want is direct confrontation with China. India wants a good neighborly relationship. So India stood strong and PM Modi rejected the push of US, Japan, and Australia. We put our foot down. We said Quad will be just a diplomatic grouping. Quad will not be militarized. So this was a message from India that we follow an independent foreign policy. But yes, there have been some deviations. For example, in 2018 itself, India fell under American pressure. Prime Minister Modi fell under the pressure of Donald Trump to cut oil imports from Iran. This was a rare exception. Previously, when Obama administration had brought sanctions on Iran, the then Indian government under Manmohan Singh had rejected the sanctions. We bypassed it and we continued importing oil from Iran. We paid with alternate currencies and other routes. Same with Myanmar. When Myanmar was under sanctions for decades, India ignored the Western sanctions and maintained our close ties with the military regime. But in 2018, things were different. US forced India to cut oil imports from Iran, even from Venezuela, and we fell under American pressure, which was a rare exception. Now, with Russia, we have again reiterated our independent foreign policy. We have ignored the American Western pressure, maintained our ties with Russia. We have imported oil from Russia and ignored the sanctions, right? So, this independent approach of India is what we call as the principle of strategic autonomy. Now, today, India believes in being multi aligned. From non alignment, we have become multi aligned. Non alignment to multi alignment. This is the transition in our foreign policy. Previously, we were strictly neutral, not choosing any sides. But now, in a new world, we are taking some new decisions that we will work with any country who will suit our interests. This is our approach from last 25, 30 years, especially from 1990s after the Cold War ended. India has truly become multi-aligned. We'll work with US as well, we'll work with China as well. We'll work with Pakistan also if required, if Pakistan works in India's interests. This is India's approach. Probably there are very few countries in the world, India is a rare exception, where the Indian leader can maybe have breakfast with Trump and meet Putin and Xi Jinping for dinner on the same day. Most countries, most leaders can't do this. Either they are on the American side or on the Russian Chinese side, but we engage with all of them, right? So India has that unique ability because we are multi aligned. So this is India's approach. Now, based on this concept, take up a practice question with reference to our principle of strategic autonomy. Consider the statements. It evolved from India's NAM policy during Cold War, but allows greater flexibility in forming issue-based partnerships today. Is there flexibility in our strategic autonomy? Is it correct or wrong? Let me know. It means India avoids any alliance with other countries to preserve its independence. Is this correct or wrong? What's the right answer? Take 15 seconds. It's moderately difficult question. You have to understand what the question is asking. So read carefully and try to let me know what's the correct answer for this. A, C. Okay. Statement 1 is correct. Statement given here is absolutely right. It evolved through the NAM movement. Correct. Prime Minister Nehru had spoken about this ideology, but we actually started following and implementing this through the establishment of the NAM. But today, it has evolved into issue-based partnership, meaning we'll partner with anyone, which is nothing but multi-alignment, from non-aligned to multi-aligned. So that's why statement 1 is right. Statement 2 is wrong. It's incorrect. Just because we have an independent foreign policy does not mean we avoid any alliance. We do form alliances, but we don't join military alliances. There is a difference. Now we are part of SCO, we are part of BRICS. Isn't that an alliance? We are part of Quad. Isn't that an alliance? So we are part of alliances, diplomatic alliances, but we will never be part of military alliances. That's why statement 2 is incorrect. It's saying India avoids any alliance. It's a wrong statement. So one only, option A, is the correct answer. So this is your mains question. Please read the question. It's pretty simple, straightforward. And based on what we have discussed, try to write your answer. Practice your answer writing. Because answer writing is the key to crack this exam. That is the real test of your knowledge. So as much as possible, when you have the time, read these static topics, take these practice questions and use them. Use the points we are discussing to practice as many answers as possible. So I really hope the session is useful for you to improve your answer writing skills along with understanding the core concepts. Coming to topic number 8, the decision-making structure of Indian foreign policy and the stakeholders involved in it. So I want you to understand which institutions are playing a role in running our foreign policy, in taking foreign policy decisions. You should have a basic awareness as to which parts of the government, which organs of the Indian state are involved in foreign policy making. So please look at the organization chart given over here. It'll give you a clean idea, a very clear idea as to who runs the foreign policy of the country. It is obviously the Prime Minister. The PM at the top plays a pivotal role in running the foreign policy of the nation, especially when it comes to strategic decisions, the big decisions. It is taken at the level of the Prime Minister on the most important pressing issues, on India's alignment with US, Russia, China, India's policy towards Pakistan. The broad strategic decisions are taken at the level of the PM. So Prime Minister's office gets involved and the Prime Minister directly plays a role. India's foreign policy making has been such that Prime Ministers have always played an important role. Their personal character is reflected in our foreign policy. To take Pandit Nehru, he was a statesman. Globally, he was widely revered, acclaimed as a statesman, as a progressive leader. His idealistic approach is what influenced our direct foreign policy, be it the integration of India, our approach towards United Nations, our support for decolonization, our support for non-aligned movement. This was a direct reflection of Prime Minister Nehru's character. You saw under Lal Bahadur Shastri, the focus India gave for the upliftment of farmers, protection of our soldiers, the defense of the nation, the efforts of India in 1965 war. That's a reflection of the commitment, the ideology of Lal Bahadur Shastri. Then under Indira Gandhi, the bold and aggressive approach of India, India standing up to US and the West, teaching Pakistan a lesson, not hesitating to break Pakistan into two, not hesitating to meddle in Sri Lanka and the neighborhood, to merge Sikkim, to support the Tamil insurgency, etc. That was a clear reflection of the more bold and aggressive foreign policy of Indira Gandhi. So every prime minister has left their mark. Rajiv Gandhi, then P. Narasimha Rao, right? I.K. Gujral, Vajpayee, Manmohan Singh, now Prime Minister Modi. Every prime minister they have brought something unique, right? But please understand, they are humans at the end of the day. You don't have to glorify someone, you don't have to vilify someone, right? They've had their share of success, they've had their share of failure. Prime Minister Nehru had a lot of success and he saw a lot of failures as well. For example, the 1962 war, it is seen as a black mark on Nehru's track record, right? Same with Prime Minister Vajpayee, the mishandling of IC 814 hijacking, the Kargil war, the ability or the inability to anticipate Pakistan's moves was seen as a failure on the part of Vajpayee. Like this, every leader, they have their huge contribution because Vajpayee transformed India's foreign policy, ensured India tested the nuclear weapons. He dealt with a very difficult time dealing with multiple terror attacks and the sanctions that were there on India after Pokhran tests. And Vajpayee was the one who reset the ties with China, with US. So he had a huge contribution. At the same time, he had shortcomings, he had failures. So that's why it's important to look at this from a very neutral viewpoint. Keep your political bias aside, keep your personal favorites aside, and look at this from a very objective prism. You will see that each prime minister, they have left their mark on India's foreign policy. They have had their share of success, they have seen failures as well. That is human, that's natural. So you don't have to get too emotional, too attached to any of this. Just look at it as it is, based on facts. So the Prime Minister plays a critical role in driving foreign policy of India, especially the big strategic decisions, and the PMO plays a critical role here. But the day-to-day functioning of foreign policy of India is through Ministry of External Affairs. That is the nodal ministry. You have a dedicated ministry to handle this portfolio, to basically manage our foreign relations, headed by a external affairs minister, a cabinet ranking minister who's assisted by the foreign secretary. The foreign secretary is the highest ranking IFS officer. In the IFS cadre, he would be the senior most and highest ranking amongst the IFS. And the foreign secretary guides, advises the external affairs minister, and if required, foreign secretary will even advise the prime minister when necessary. Foreign secretary can have direct access to the PM when required. So the MEA maintains a global network of Indian missions, Indian embassies, high commissions in global capitals around the world, Indian consulates in important cities around the world. So the Indian diplomats who run these missions, the Indian ambassador, the high commissioners, right? And the other career diplomats who are deployed. They are the ones who run our foreign policy on a day to day basis. In Delhi, where MEA is headquartered, this acts as the executive uh, organ, right? So here as well, MEA takes the centralized decisions, implements the foreign policy goals of India, looks after the day to day matters as far as foreign relations are concerned. It also collects inputs and feedback from around the world and advises the foreign minister and the prime minister accordingly, right? Then we have RAW, India's external intelligence agency, which generates classified intelligence. RAW will be involved in covert operations. It will be running a network of informants using technical methods as well to collect classified information. For example, spying on military information of other countries, target countries, spying on the political development, social developments of other countries, getting those inputs and feeding it to the hierarchy. So, RAW generates very crucial intelligence. In fact, all the intelligence agencies, they collate the intelligence at National Security Council, which has been playing a predominant role in our foreign policy of late. The last 20 years, since National Security Council was set up, which is headed by your National Security Advisor, the NSA has been the right hand man of the PM to advise and guide the PM in foreign policy and security matters. It started with Prime Minister Vajpayee, who appointed Brajesh Mishra as the first NSA of India. Then under Manmohan Singh, we had J.N. Dikshit from Foreign Service again. He was the Foreign Secretary. Whereas Brajesh Mishra under Vajpayee was from the IAS, right? Then we had M.K. Narayanan from the IPS, former Director of Intelligence Bureau. Then we had Shivshankar Menon from the IFS, who was also the Foreign Secretary under Manmohan Singh. Now, under Prime Minister Modi, we have Ajit Doval from the IPS, who has been the Director of IB. So, the role of NSA has gone usually to IFS, IPS officers with experience in foreign policy, intelligence, and security. So, the NSA heads the National Security Council, and this organ has been playing a critical role in advising the government, advising the leadership. So, all the intelligence generated is collated here. The intelligence from IB, the domestic intelligence, then military intelligence from the army, naval intelligence, air intelligence. The intelligence collated here, and also the experts and the former retired officers who are part of NSC, right? There are former diplomats, former intelligence officers, former military officers who are part of National Security Council who provide advisory, expert opinion. Even experts from outside are enrolled, from private sector, from media, think tanks. So think NSC has become like a think tank of sorts, generating the valuable inputs needed that guides our foreign policy. Then respective cabinet ministers, ministries, the parliament itself, state governments, they also play a big role. For example, when India is headed towards climate change negotiations, don't you think environment ministry would play a big role? When we are participating in FTA talks or WTO negotiations, finance ministry, commerce ministry will play a big role. So concerned cabinet ministers and ministries will also contribute. State governments will contribute their inputs. If states are being impacted by a foreign policy decision, especially the border states, they will be consulted. See, foreign policy is fully the domain of the center. It comes under the union list. Under the seventh schedule of the constitution, union government has full authority jurisdiction to run the foreign policy of the country. But being a federal polity, the center will consult with the states to generate their opinion, to generate feedback from them. But center is not bound by what the states are telling, right? So states also play a role. States play a role in attracting foreign investments. States play a role in border security, right? So they also get involved in some way or the other in shaping the foreign policy of India. The parliament, for example, there is a standing committee. We have a parliamentary standing committee on external affairs, which scrutinizes India's foreign policy actions. It can summon the foreign secretary and concerned officials asking for reports from them on important foreign policy matters and security matters. So parliament plays a role over here as well. Then there are non-state actors. Until now, I was mentioning the role of state actors. Prime Minister's office and Prime Minister, MEA, RAW, all intelligence agencies, National Security Council, all ministries, parliament, state governments, all these are state entities, state actors. But non-state actors who are not part of the state, who are not part of the government, can also influence foreign policy. For example, pressure groups. When India is negotiating a FTA or participating in WTO talks, don't you think farmer unions will represent themselves, try to put pressure on the government to protect farmers' interests? Don't you think industry associations like ASOCAM or CII and the others, don't you think they will lobby with the government, the big industrialists, right? They will try to influence the foreign policy of India. Big multinational corporations, private companies, media outlets, newspapers, TV channels, journalists, all these are non state actors. Even NGOs involved in social work, human rights, protecting and promoting human rights, or environmental organizations, for example, they all play a role in influencing the government decisions. Then you also have detrimental non state actors who have a negative impact. For example, terrorist groups, criminal organizations, pirates, right? These are also non-state actors. The term non-state actor is a very wide terminology referring to any non-government entity which can influence the government, bring that pressure on the government. There are think tanks as well, which carry out expert research and provide inputs to the government. So they all fall under the non-state category. So all these stakeholders are involved in foreign policy. Clear? Now, take up this practice question. On the left, we have the stakeholders listed when it comes to our foreign policy decision making. On the right, the role has been explained. So, is it a correct match? That is what you need to check. MEA matched with Principal Executor Formulator of Foreign Policy. National Security Council matched with Provides strategic advice to PM, coordinates national security policy. Parliament Standing Committee on External Affairs scrutinizes foreign policy, the treaties that India signs, and our foreign policy budget. What's the correct answer? How many of these pairs are correctly matched? Or rather, which of these pairs are correctly matched? Can you tell me? D, Hema, Tejaswini, Chirag. Most of you are saying D. Very good. All the three pairs are correct. 1, 2, 3. All three are correctly matched. Now take up your mains question, mains practice question. Discuss the institutional framework of foreign policy decision making in India. So, for this question, it's better you draw the organization chart. Like how I have given this flow chart over here. You can easily draw this in your answer as well. Correct? So, in the introduction, you can point out there are multiple stakeholders involved in foreign policy decision making. In the body, draw the flow chart as it is. Then explain the role of each stakeholder and conclude your answer. Clear? To take up this question, you have to detail the role of MEA, NSC, PMO, and as well as the armed forces, think tanks, and parliament. So you can easily break it down, very factual, but you can enhance the answer by including the flow chart, the organizational chart. Now, coming to state and non-state actors. By now, you already have an idea as to who are state actors, who are non-state actors. So let's quickly break down this topic, revise this once, and look at some practice questions. See, the primary difference between state and non-state, it's very, very simple. Any government entity which is part of the government, funded by the government, which is uh, inherently a part of the sovereign state, is a state actor. For example, police force, the Indian Army, Indian Navy, Indian Air Force, our intelligence agencies, all the ministries, departments, organs of the government, institutions like ISRO, CSIR, DRDO, all of them, anything which is part of the government, funded by the government, which is an integral part of the state apparatus, becomes state actors. Similarly, foreign governments, they will also have their own state actors. In US, for example, US armed forces, the CIA, the FBI, right? Various departments of the US government. They're all part of the US government, the state, which is sovereign. In Pakistan, you have intelligence agencies like ISI, the Pakistani Army, Navy, Air Force, right? They're all part of the Pakistani state. They are state actors. Then China's intelligence agency, the MSS, Ministry of State Security. The PLA, People's Liberation Army, its Navy and Air Force, all the organs of the Chinese state, the Communist Party, they are state actors in China. So anything which is part of a sovereign government, a sovereign state, those entities are your state actors. Non state refers to non government, which are not part of the government. This could be a private company, Reliance, Adani, Tata, Infosys, Wipro, or Apple, Meta, Google, Huawei, ZTE Telecom, right? ByteDance from China, DeepSeek from China, ChatGPT from US, all these large corporations, big companies which can have a big influence. They are non-state actors. They're non-government entities. It could be media outlets, right? Because they influence public opinion. They influence governments, be it newspapers, magazines, digital media platforms, social media, and of course, electronic media as well, right? Then you have NGOs involved in social work, welfare work, and human rights protection or environmental conservation. All these NGOs play a role. These are non state actors. Then some non state actors, as I told you, can be having a negative effect, a detrimental effect. This includes your terrorist organizations, Islamic State, Al Qaeda, Lashkar e Toiba, or the Somalian pirates who engage in piracy, organized criminal mafias and criminal cartels, which are involved in drug smuggling, human trafficking, arms trafficking, or wildlife trafficking, even cyber crimes, cyber criminals. They're all part of non state entities, non state actors. And sometimes state actors might be sponsoring non state actors to sabotage our interests, to derail our interests, to threaten our security. This is usually done through covert intelligence methods. For example, Pakistani state, the ISI, Pakistani army, which is part of the state, sponsoring terrorist groups against India. That's a covert proxy war. Or allegations of American intelligence funding NGOs, European governments funding NGOs to carry out destabilization in India, or Chinese companies working for the Chinese state actors, Chinese intelligence, and the PLA to spy on India, to carry out cyber attacks and cyber warfare. All these are examples of covert proxy wars where state actors are secretly funding and using non state actors as proxies. So it's not just terrorist groups or criminals who might be used, even multinational corporations. Media can be misused, NGOs can be funded and misused. So this link is what poses a threat sometimes. If non-state actors are working against our interests and if they're funded by hostile governments, hostile state actors, usually intelligence agencies, that becomes a threat for our nation. So take up this practice question. Consider the following. State actors have sovereign legal authority under international law, whereas non-state actors do not. Obviously, this is a correct statement. That's what I told you. State actors are part of a sovereign state. They have legitimacy under international law, under the UN Charter. Non state actors do not have sovereign legitimacy. Non state actors can only play a constructive role, such as humanitarian aid, advocacy, and cannot be a source of conflict. Completely wrong statement. Because some non state actors might play a constructive role, correct? They might be promoting humanitarian work. For example, uh, there is a organization, a NGO called Doctors Without Borders, Medicine Sans Frontiers. They actually provide humanitarian relief work in war zones, in disaster affected areas, right? Then you have reputed organizations in environment, in human rights, which actually do some phenomenal work. So they are playing a positive role, a constructive role. Private companies, media, think tanks, they might be performing a constructive role. But don't you think there are non state actors which are having a detrimental effect? Terrorist groups, criminals, pirates, cyber criminals, they are having a detrimental effect. Or NGOs and companies funded by hostile state actors. So, second statement is wrong because of this. It's saying they only play a constructive role. This is wrong. They can play a constructive role, they might play a destructive role as well. Third statement says multinational corporations, terror groups, both are non-state actors. Absolutely correct statement. Private companies, terrorist groups, they're all non-state entities, any non-government entity. So 1 and 3 only. Option B is your correct answer. Now coming to the last topic. Before that, note down the practice question for your mains. Non-state actors have emerged as powerful shapers of international relations, both constructive and disruptive. Discuss the statement with special reference to India's internal security foreign policy challenges. So this is your question for your answer writing practice. Now we come to the last topic for today. Almost completing 3 hours of our marathon. So let me know if you have found the session to be useful. If you've understood these basic concepts. If this has built a good foundation for you for international relations, please let me know in the comments and press the like button. So let's quickly wrap up the session. India's primary area of strategic interest. In our foreign policy, we have defined a certain region as a top priority region, our primary area of strategic interest. Now, the point is, why should we define a focus area? For example, if you look at global powers like US, for them, the whole world is of interest to them. That's because US is a global power, superpower. It has the resources, the capability to influence any part of the world. If required, US can pump money into South America. It can send its military to the Pacific or to South Asia or to Middle East or to the Arctic. Wherever you want in the world, US can exercise its military, economic and diplomatic influence. That's why a superpower like US or even an emerging global power like China, they don't have to define a specific area of interest. The whole world is of their interest. But that's not the case with a country like India. India is a developing nation. We have limited resources, limited capabilities. So, to optimize our resources, optimize our budget, to prioritize the resources we have, the limited reach and influence that we have to define a primary focus area. Is that clear? So, India has such a area defined as our primary area of strategic interest. It lies between two important geographical points, Strait of Hormuz and Strait of Malacca. Both are strategic choke points, maritime choke points. Hormuz Strait to the west of India, Malacca Strait to the east of India. Look at the map here. Hormuz is this narrow opening that connects your Persian Gulf with Gulf of Oman. This strategic maritime choke point is absolutely critical for global oil supplies, and Indian economy is heavily dependent on it. So from here, approximately, the region covering Suez Canal in Egypt, which is another maritime choke point, Bab al-Mandeb Strait over here near Horn of Africa that connects your Red Sea with Arabian Sea, with Gulf of Aden. This is another important maritime route for India that links India with Europe, India with the West. Then we have Cape of Good Hope and the Mozambique Channel over here in Eastern and Southern Africa. So this belt stretching towards Malacca Strait, covering even Central Asia in the north. This box that I have drawn here, this is our primary area of strategic interest. The Malacca Strait near Singapore, I already explained, is another choke point. A lot of global trade passes through this. A lot of India's exports, imports are dependent on it. Even our oil and energy supplies pass through Malacca Strait. So these choke points are so crucial for India's economic stability, our national security. That's why this immediate region, we can call it our immediate neighborhood, our extended neighborhood. This region is our focus. Roughly the region of around, I would say 5,000 kilometers in complete radius over here. Okay, roughly you take a 2,500 kilometer line, draw a circle around India with a diameter of 5,000 kilometers. So this region, which falls between Hormuz and Malacca, this is our top focus, covering Central Asia, West Asia, East Africa, Horn of Africa, then Indian Ocean, Southeast Asia. So this is our primary focus area as far as foreign policy and security is concerned. Now, when you define such an area, this will help different organs of the government to prioritize their budget, to optimize the resources and build the capabilities to dominate this region first. For example, let's say MEA, RAW, they will build those capabilities needed to dominate this region. MEA will have more presence here, RAW will have greater presence and more operations in this region because this is the focal point. Similarly, our armed forces, Indian Army, Navy, Air Force, they will procure such weapons which are needed to dominate this region, to access and dominate this region. DRDO will build such weapons, missiles, which will help India dominate this region first and then look beyond this. ISRO will develop such satellites which will help India to first dominate this region and then look beyond this. So, this is why having a primary area of strategic interest is important. Clear? It will help optimize the limited resources and budget that we have, and it will help us pay more attention to the regions which really matter to India's security and stability. Now, I hope this important concept is clearly understood. Take up this prelims question. India's primary area of strategic interest is often described as the region between Strait of Hormuz and Strait of Malacca. This is because major share of our crude oil imports passes through this maritime corridor. Obviously correct. A lot of our oil import comes through Hormuz. Some of it comes through Malacca Strait as well. It is a critical sea lane of communication linking Persian Gulf, Indian Ocean, and Southeast Asia. This again is correct. From Hormuz to Malacca, don't you think these choke points are connecting Persian Gulf with Indian Ocean and Southeast Asia? This is also correct. Both 1 and 2. Option C is the right answer. Now take up this mains question. The region between Hormuz and Malacca Strait constitutes India's primary area of strategic interest. A direct statement. Discuss the economic, security, geopolitical significance of this region for India. What you can do in the introduction, first explain this. You can point out that India's primary area of interest lies in this region between Hormuz to Malacca, okay, in 1 or 2 lines. In the body, try to draw the map. You can draw a rough map of India, right, depicting Hormuz, Malacca, then Bab el Mandeb and Suez Canal, Cape of Good Hope and Mozambique Channel, pointing out what is India's dependency on these choke points, why these areas are important, that is Central Asia, West Asia, this part of Africa, East Africa and Horn of Africa and Southern Africa, and Southeast Asia, and of course Indian Ocean region and South Asia where India is located. Why these regions are important? Draw a rough map, explain this with your pointers, and conclude the answer. Maybe you can list out the threats, list out the challenges present in this region, and point out why we need a primary area of strategic interest. What's the advantage? I told you there are 2 advantages. One is to optimize your budget, utilize the resources, build the capabilities. Second is to pay for focus and give more attention to this region which really matters to us. So explain all of this and conclude your answer. So on this note, I bring this marathon session to an end. I think we have discussed for almost 3 hours, 5 minutes. 10 core concepts have been covered, which is very important for GS paper 2 under international relations and as well as for your PSIR option. I really hope this session has been useful. Let us know what you think about this initiative in the comments, and we will bring such marathons every Friday at 7 p.m. from different subjects, from polity, science and tech, economy, geography, history, right? Covering every single subject so that one entire topic can be covered in just 2.5 to 3 hours. Now you tell me, do you need any other source for this particular topic, for covering the basics of IR? If you have attended the session, I'm pretty sure and pretty confident that you don't need any other material, any other source, because practice questions are also part of it. Detailed examples have been discussed. This is what we will do every Friday through our one-shot marathon series. So that is it from my side. Thanks for watching. If you like the initiative, press that like button. Please comment more, share the video with other aspirants so that we can have a wider reach. That is it. Thanks for watching. Have a good night.